Ladies and gentlemen, councillors, officers, welcome all to the Planning Development Control Committee B meeting this morning. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons in the chamber and in the social areas during breakouts. Please ensure that you wear a mask unless you are speaking, or if you're unable to do so, that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please maintain social distance at all times during the meeting and during any breaks, and please ensure that microphones are muted when you're not speaking. That you do not interrupt the other speaker. Members are reminded that they should not have alternative communication lines open, i.e. team chats, and that if you are contacted by a third party during an application, you should bring this to the legal advisor's attention. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Additionally, you'll be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair of the meeting, and we'll be using the e-voting for this meeting on modern.gov. And Councillor Caston, I realise that you're going to be doing this verbally by hand. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. A few introductions. I think it's on my left. Everything's behind me today. I've got Ian Deprez, who's our legal advisor.
Good morning, Chairman.
Thank you. Gemma's not here, so John Pateman-G, who is the area planning manager. Robert Carmichael, governance officer. Daniel Cameron, Alex Scott and Catherine Hale, all at back, who are our case officers today. And we've got ward members joining us. Councillor Matthew Hicks, Councillor John Field, who is going to represent, if he can get here, if not, we've got a letter from him, and Councillor Andrew Mellon, who also forms part of today's committee. So let's move to the agenda, please. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. This morning we have apologies from Councillor Cathy Guthrie and substitution from Councillor Lavinia Hadingham for Councillor Guthrie. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and noted. To receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members, if there are any. There are none. Declarations of lobbying. There are none. And declarations of personal site visits. Okay, Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, I've visited the site in Bacton, so I won't be voting on that anyway.
Thank you. Anybody else? Good. We'll now move to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April 2021. Are there any points arising to the accuracy of the minutes? In that case, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Caston. And a seconder. Councillor Mellon, thank you. Governance officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. If members could please go to the modern.gov app and go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner and go on the subsection of voting/attendance and click on the vote that is currently in progress. I will now take Councillor Carston's vote.
Thank you, that's 4, please.
4. And I believe, Councillor Stringer, are you able to vote on modern.gov or is it not working?
No. So I'm sorry, it didn't say that on the agenda that we're going to be voting electronically. It's not a problem. We'll take it verbally.
So is that, sorry, just to confirm, 4. Thank you, Councillor. So, Chair, all results have been in. That is 7 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. That's carried. And I will sign those at the end of this meeting. To receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And now we're going to look at the schedule of applications. But before we begin the determinations this morning, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that the application DC 21-01747 and 2101800 at the site of J. Brahaney Contractors at Florden Road, Creeting St Mary, have been withdrawn by the applicant and as such will not be heard today. The ward members and parish council have been informed ahead of this meeting. So we're going to move on to the first application, which is DC 21/00755, land to the south of Shop Street, Worlingworth in Suffolk. And I invite the case officer, Daniel Cameron, to introduce the application to the committee. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Yes, we have application DC 21/00755, land to the south of Shop Street in Worlingworth, and this is a reserved matters application for appearance, layout, scale, access and landscaping for the erection of 26 dwellings. Just by way of background to the application, the outline was approved under DC 17-04689, and that approved details of layout. Subsequently, we received a non-material amendment to that outline that removed consideration of layout from the outline. Now, given that that application would be returning to members for consideration of the layout as part of the reserved matters, it wasn't felt by officers that there was any detriment to the consideration of the application, so that's why you have a revised outline, if any of you remember seeing this site previously. So here we have the aerial plan of Worlingworth with the site shown edged orange and shaded purple. We have the neighbouring John Deere site here. We have a agricultural site just to the north, and then the residential is to the west and the south following the run of the road here. If we just quickly looked at the constraints map, you'll see there's a few buildings shaded orange. Those are grade 2 listed buildings. And we're also adjacent to the built-up area boundary of Worlingworth as it currently is in the adopted development plan. And if we move on to the joint local plan, you'll see that the settlement boundary for Worlingworth is now shown in purple and rings the site, and the site is now allocated within the joint local plan for the delivery of 26 dwellings, and those numbers are counted within the 5-year housing land supply trajectory as well, members. There's a few issues to be aware of with this site as we go through it, and hopefully they're clear for you from the report as submitted. The first issue that I think we probably want to have a look at is the timing, and just to sort of mention to members the reason why we have this application coming with late papers and the recommendation that we do. Normally an outline application would be submitted with a timing condition that requires submission of reserved matters within 3 years of the date of grant, and then a further 2 years to commence following the agreement of the reserved matters. In this instance, this hasn't been applied, and there's 3 years to commence the development. The outline application was approved in 2018, and there is now a need to commence on site or the outline will lapse. So that's why we have the application brought to you in the manner it is, members. I just want to turn your attention as well as I flick through some of the plans that were provided for you. There's our site layout. Just to a few of the other issues that have come up as part of the application. I think the first one to note, and this is also some information for you in late papers, members, we've got an additional response from the flood and water team, the county council. They now have removed their holding objection such that they're content for the application to go forward. I think on the basis of that, it would be prudent to alter the recommendation because we no longer need their approval for the details. And also, I think probably it'd be worth removing the requirement for any conditions at the end of the report, members, that the flood and water team deem necessary, because they've indicated to us in the late papers that those aren't required. While we quickly talk about the flooding issue, it's worth picking up the comments from the parish council. They note an existing issue with the Anglian water foul network that occasionally leads to flooding around the community centre. We've contacted Anglian Water on this, and the parish's notes indicate that Anglian Water are looking to remedy this situation. The response from Anglian Water hasn't said that we're looking at something that would exacerbate that issue, and they're not content to object to the development coming forward. So I'll quickly run through some of the plans since we've got them. So we have the site layout. So from the outline, there was secured a large area of open space along the frontage, and this is retained. And then we have 26 individual units provided within the site. All are now provided as detached or semi-detached dwellings, all of them as houses, so we have no flats within the scheme anymore, members. And that has benefits in that we've been able to provide a private garden to every unit, and moreover we have on-plot parking provided for every unit as well, whereas the previous layout included some use of parking courts. We have comments from the Highway Authority with regards to the application. The application has been revised in light of those comments. Annoyingly, the Highways Authority chose to respond to the discharge of conditions application rather than this one. But I can report there's no objection to the improved details, so there's no issue there for them. If we come forward, that's the wrong one. We have the massing plan, so you can see there's a number of single-storey buildings shown in sort of light green teal colour. These are garages. There are 19 garages provided on site to some of the dwellings, and then we have 3 bungalows provided within the site. One here on plot 3, one here, and then one here. And you'll see that those correspond to the areas where we've had public representations from the properties to the southeast about potential amenity issues, and to the northeast about potential amenity issues. So the inclusion of those bungalows effectively means that we don't have any issues with potential overlooking, and overshadowing is also reduced due to the scale of the buildings. If we come on to the materials plan, we've got a quick run through. We've got mainly red brick and clay pan tile buildings proposed, although there is some black weatherboard, slate and black pan tile with gold brick, so quite reflective of what we have in the local palette of materials, and we'll show that when we come on to the images of the site as well, members. We've had an update to the fencing plan in light with comments from neighbouring properties, and as well the Place Services landscaping team, and I'll come on to a few more of the place landscaping comments when we look at the landscaping plans for you members as well. What we have got now is a low hedge running along the frontage of the site. We have areas of close bordered fencing and hedging to either side, and then at the back we've got a timber rail and hedge that will run along the back, and then at the back of these properties we'll have a post and rail fence that will mark their rear boundaries. So in terms of maintenance of that hedge, that's not left up to any one property owner, that will be retained by the developer, and the imposition of that fence just means that that hedge is then easily maintainable from both sides. And if we come to the landscaping plan as well, members, we've actually got 2 options before you here today. So one of the comments from Place Landscaping was they were concerned that the number of trees shown on the landscaping plan would mean that the other grasses and wildflowers within the public open space would fail to thrive. The applicant's looking to maintain this area themselves, so there's no issue of that cost if there's additional tree planting coming back to the council. But what the applicants have asked is just to consider these 2 options. We have option A, reduced tree planting in line with the landscape services comments, and then also option B, which shows a denser area of tree planting, but that would likely have biodiversity and ecological benefits as well as landscape improvements. You know, so we can really double down on replacement planting within the site. If we come now to the photos just to show the site. So this is the view along Shop Street. There's an area of trees and hedging visible along that frontage. Now that is to be removed. None of the trees are protected by TPO, and we're not in a special landscape designation or conservation area that would require their attention. And we do have significant replacement planting within the scheme, even if we decided to go for the lesser planting option put forward by the developer. Now, in terms of that, that's necessary because what we have being delivered as part of the scheme is a footpath to connect into the rest of the village along this frontage here. But what we also have is we've got a pumping station as part of the drainage strategy to come in, and Anglian Water will require parking and visibility space from that parking that will necessitate the removal of that vegetation, unfortunately. This is the view the other way, so we can see the site here, and then the business site here. And then this is where we sort of come over the site. It's fairly flat. There isn't very much of note within it. We have the bank of trees away to the back, well outside of the site boundary. And then as well, you can see some of the neighbouring residential development down the lane to the side of the site. If we pull back slightly, you can see some of the development that we have facing onto the site. We've got sort of quite traditional form, red brick, slate, render, slate, red brick, slate, and then obviously in the previous, and you can just catch a glimpse of them there, we have pan tile and black weatherboarding as well. And obviously crossing the site, we have a public right-of-way, and we have comments from the public right-of-way team objecting to the public right-of-way being crossed by the estate road. Now, it's interesting to note that when we consulted the public rights-of-way team at Outline, they had no concerns, and the public right-of-way was to be crossed by an estate road at that point. No diversion of the public right-of-way is required by this application, so the public right-of-way, other than likely being stopped up temporarily during construction, would remain unimpeded once the development was in place. The previous layout that was agreed by members at Outline did require the deviation of the public right-of-way, so it would have had an additional legal process to have gone through. I wanted to pick up as well about the point made in the report for you members about in terms of sustainability. I'm just going to quickly flick through the house types, and if members have any particular questions on them, we can come back to them at that point. But in terms of the sustainability aspects of the site, we've got air source heat pumps provided to every dwelling. So we've got about 38% of the energy needs of the buildings being met through the inclusion of the air source heat pumps. And we're also looking at dwellings that are built in excess of the requirements of building regulations for sustainability as well, Part L. So that we're looking at about a 10 to 11% increase over what is required in building regulations. And we're also looking at meeting minimum water efficiency requirements for all dwellings as well. Obviously all the units have on-site parking as well, and 19 of them have garages. So in terms of electric vehicle charging points, everyone has the potential to provide them within the site as and when they choose to take on an electric vehicle. There we go. I'll pop back to the site plans and I'll turn over to members and take questions on the report.
Thank you, Daniel. Members, do you have any questions at all for the case officer? Councillor Hadingham.
Thank you. Is that Tuckwell's next door? And what exactly is the buffer sort of situation there? I can just see a sort of shaded area, but what exactly is there?
Thank you. So this is existing access down the side. So Tuckwell's has, I don't think there's anything on that side, but down this side we have a close boarded fence. So that was required at outline stage. That was a requirement of our environmental health team, just to say we need something to try and stop noise during working hours. So that's retained, but we also have some hedge planting as well down there. So we have the noise benefits of the close boarded fence, but we've also got some sort of slightly more aesthetically appealing boundary planting given the area. Members will note in the comments from the heritage team, they were particularly concerned about the close boarded fencing down this side of the site. However, I think given the concerns of the environmental health team, I think I'm content as officer to balance that and say there's probably an interest to having the noise from the adjacent site reduced.
Councillor Stringer.
Yes, I just have two questions. One is for the legal officer. On page 15, it mentions pre-application advice, and it says the application form notes advice being delivered by officers is understood to be given outside of the formal pre-application process, i.e. it wasn't paid for. Therefore, any advice provided is not binding. That presupposes that if it's paid for, it is binding. That is not the case. That paragraph, by it being written, is actually potentially bringing this council into disrepute. And I don't think the paragraph should be there at all. No advice is binding on this council.
In that case, we'll go to the person that know. Mr Dupre, please.
Sorry. Well, I'm very happy to give what advice I can. Perhaps the officer might want to explain that further if you can, Mr Cameron.
Sorry, members. No, I felt that something needed to be in there just to make you aware that there had been pre-application advice. I completely take the point about the interpretation of the paragraph as it's written. Yeah, no, I mean, officer advice is officer advice, and I think there is an expectation that where pre-application advice is given and paid for, that the council will be able to deliver a decision in line with its advice, unless material considerations prove otherwise. But obviously, regardless, you know, pre-application advice is advice given by officers. It shouldn't be seen as being binding on the decision of members, who of course are the decision taker in this instance. I just didn't feel it was correct to not indicate to members that there had been some pre-application discussion, or even though it was outside of the paid framework.
If I may now, thank you for that, Mr Cameron. Yeah, I mean, I think all members understand pre-application advice is two things. It's, to use a lawyer's phrase, but totally without prejudice, i.e. it is, as Mr Cameron says, the advice of an officer, and on the understanding that if the decision is made by members, as this is, it's not that advice is a recommendation, it's not in any way binding on them. Secondly, in any case, all pre-application advice is subject to consultation, isn't it, and to change circumstances, and not in that sense the officer may change their view at some point. I think in this case Mr Cameron wished to make the explanation to you that it was of a less formal kind, and perhaps the wording has had a rather an unhappy result, as Councillor String has noted, but I think I understand it was made with good intentions. So.
One further question, if I may, Chair.
I'll just let Mr Clemency come in, and I'll come back to you if that's okay. Thank you.
Just in respect of the pre-application advice, if I can just withdraw that last sentence of that paragraph, I think that would resolve the issue. So we formally withdraw that from this document. Can I also just ask two other things, please, if I may? Just to clarify to members formally that the recommendation before you has altered as a consequence of, just to make sure members are clear on what's before them, has altered because of the difference in what's come back from the Suffolk County's flood team. So the element within your recommendation in your papers that talks about further agreement necessary from the floods team is essentially removed. The recommendation before you is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. And just one last point, and Dan might need to help me out on this, because unfortunately I'm catching up slightly because I was thinking another officer was going to be here. So just to clarify the point, the landscape plan you had on the screen, which landscape plan is before members to consider, A or B? Because I wasn't clear.
Both. So A would more closely reflect comments back from Place Services Landscaping in their concern about the number of trees provided in that area of public open space. However, the developer still feels that there's a benefit in terms of biodiversity and ecology, and as well as landscape, in providing a degree of replacement planting. In terms of maintenance, the developer will be taking on the maintenance of the scheme anyway, so there isn't a cost associated with maintaining the scheme to the council. It's purely the advice from landscape says we probably want a few less trees.
So, okay, so essentially we are asking members to decide which landscaping plan they like. Right, one has less trees, one has more trees. Thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, one other question. You mentioned that the dwellings are going to be using air source heat pumps and they'll have electric charging points, etc. Out of the 40 plus structures on this site, how many of the roofs will actually face south?
So, in terms of facing south, we don't have any roof slopes directly facing south. Everything's presented gable end on, but you would have capacity within most dwellings to incorporate some element of solar panels or photovoltaics within the scheme.
How?
We'll probably come back to that. Okay, Councillor Gould, please, and then Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Chair. In a sense, Mr. Pateman-G got there before me. I was going to just make a suggestion in relation to the pre-app advice paragraph. Although members on this side of the chamber on this occasion would dearly like to always have the option of altering officer reports, sadly that's not a possibility. I was going to suggest some note in the minutes to clarify the point, but withdraw the paragraph is sort of simpler. But there is, I think, something to reflect on here in terms of writing future reports. Thank you.
Thank you. We will come back to that. Councillor Hicks, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask 3 quick questions? How many visitor parking spaces are there for the 26 houses? Is there a current planning application from Tuckwells to extend a workshop next door of significant size? And could you explain what the pumping station is for that's on the map in the middle of the area and give more detail on what its function is?
Thank you. So we have visitor parking spaces. Here we have 2 here, 2. Within the report, it's noted that we've got an excess of on-site parking provided. 1-bed units are provided with 2 parking spaces. Everything else is provided with spaces that meet adopted standards. And there's a point to be made about garaging as well that I'll come to later, but I think let's get back onto the questions. I'm not aware of any applications from Tuckwells expanding, but I would take advice from the local ward member on that point. And then the third point, the pumping station here, this is required by Anglian Water, and this is required to feed into the networks and the existing networks, so it will be subject to further agreement. You'll see in the conditions we've recommended that we have control over the appearance of materials for the pumping station and for the substation that's also required by the national grid, such that we control that aspect of the appearance of the site, but unfortunately that's a requirement of Anglian Water for bringing forward the development and be subject to all the various approvals and legal agreements that exist sort of adjacent to planning after the grant.
Could you just explain what the pumping station is actually going to do? So it's a pumping station to do what?
So the pumping station will be pumping water into the foul sewer network. So that will be both from surface water drainage and then also foul drainage.
We do have the agent, and we can probably ask very shortly. We'll wait until you come on, actually, Nicola. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. Can you show us down on the plan where the right-of-way is? And the other question is the existing trees that are going to be removed, where do they fit in with the plan?
Apologies, members, I'll catch up. Right, so the public right-of-way just runs across the site here. If we go to the next lot of photos, so you'll see it continues to cross the public open space and then down the side here, and then we continue over the farmland. If we quickly run to the views across the site, it's very much just a natural public right of way. It just runs across the site north-south there. The existing batch of trees on the site are these ones here at the... Now, in terms of the design of the pumping station, that'll sit just behind it. Anglian Water require access for their vehicles to the pumping station from the road, and they also require visibility displays for those vehicles to make safe access onto the highway and exit from. So that's why we have the removal of those. But obviously from the landscaping plans, we do have a good amount of replacement planting, and obviously it's then at members' discretion as to whether that is a lesser amount within the public open space to try and bring forward other benefits in terms of the comments put forward by the landscaping service, or to really sort of push the amount of replacement planting within the site.
Any other questions? Councillor Hicks.
Yes, can I just point out a planning application was validated on Friday the 4th of June in the site next door for an increased workshop, crane, etc.
Thank you, that's of interest, but obviously we're dealing with this planning permission, so let's stay on track with that, but thank you for that information. No other questions? Okay, Councillor Stringer, thank you for raising the point. I think it's valid and really important, actually. And also, thank you for the advice that we've received. It's right to be transparent, it's right to be truthful, and I think that's what you're trying to do. However, it's also right that we write it the right way so we don't perceive it in the wrong way. So therefore, Councillor Gould and Mr Paynton-G, I agree on what you say, and I'd like that minuted as being removed as a comment. Thank you. Okay, we have no representatives from the parish, objectors or supporters, but we do have the agent, which is Nicole Perryman. Nicole, you have 3 minutes. Let me know when you're ready to start, please.
There we go. Good morning, members. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Nicole Perryman, planner at Ingleton Wood. On behalf of my client flagship group, I'd like to begin by thanking council members and officers for the opportunity to speak this morning. The presentation by your officer and the accompanying committee report are comprehensive, and as such I don't wish to repeat the issues covered. However, I will highlight a couple of key points. As you've heard, this application relates to the reserved matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping pursuant to the outline permission granted in 2018 by some members of this committee. The principle of development and most of the technical details are therefore already approved, and consideration of this application before you today relates only to these specific reserved matters. The layout of the scheme follows the same principles as those presented in outline and has only been improved by allowing the existing public right-of-way to be accommodated, as well as incorporating an improved mix of dwellings, which most notably replaces flats with houses. The development retains a mixture of houses and bungalows located in key areas to avoid overlooking and preserve residential amenity. Whilst modern in appearance, the dwellings have been designed to a high standard with materials that reflect the local vernacular. This unique and enhanced design style will be a flagship site for the applicant in Suffolk, with sustainability at the forefront. An improved fabric efficiency will ensure that the requirements of building regulations Part L are exceeded, and with the added benefit of air source heat pumps installed to all homes. The applicant is also committed to providing a significant amount of public open space with an extensive landscaping scheme to improve the environment for new and existing residents of the village. Across the site, biodiversity enhancements are also proposed, including new native hedgerows in excess of 360 metres, bird nesting boxes, hedgehog gaps, native trees and wildflower meadow. We acknowledge that the Parish Council have raised concerns regarding drainage issues in the village. This is largely an off-site matter, and granting permission today for these reserved matters proposals will not preclude the applicant having to satisfy the necessary legal requirements with Anglian Water under separate legislation and through the necessary existing outline planning conditions for both surface water and foul drainage. As such, members should be comforted that adequate planning control is already in place by a condition to secure appropriate drainage requirements for the site. In summary, the proposed development is consistent with the outline permission and complies with national planning policy and the adopted development plan. The proposals provide substantial planning gain in delivering high-quality, sustainable accommodation of a high-quality design that reflects modern needs of living, to contribute towards the Council's housing supply as well as significant biodiversity gains. There are therefore no planning reasons as to why permission should not be granted today. We therefore respectfully request that members endorse the recommendation of their officer and grant permission today subject to the conditions and requirements that have been outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the agent, please? You got off lightly. Thank you. I'd now like to move to the ward member, please, which is Councillor Hicks.
Thanks very much. So I've lived about 2 miles from this site for the last 18 years, and the village and the community expects the housing to come forward. I don't think that's an issue at all. The biggest issue, which hasn't been addressed and we keep circling, is that further down the village by the community centre, every winter, the drains come up, raw sewage appears in the village, and every year Anglian Water say you can keep building more houses, everything's fine. Now, we're creating a pumping station to pump the sewage and the surface water into the drain system that is already creaking, that already overflows with raw sewage into the village, and everyone is again saying it will be fine. It simply is not fine for the residents who every winter have sewage in their garden. And the problem with this application, in my view, is it meets all the criteria. It's very difficult to find any reasons to refuse it, but the fact is for the residents, they're going to suffer more, and this matter is not being addressed. And we've heard that the pumping station is designed to pump the sewage and the water into the system that further down the system cannot cope. Now, I'm told Anglian Water will never say there is a problem, because if there is, then they have liability issues. So this just gets a worse and worse problem every year. And I do feel that being rushed through committee, because in 2 weeks the deadline is up, well, we've had 3 years to sort this out. Why do we have to rush it just for the convenience of the developer? It should have come earlier, and they should have brought this sooner, and the matter should have been resolved. The floods team sorted the problem out at 10 o'clock at night 2 days ago because of the rush. So it's very hard to refuse, but I would really ask that we give serious thought to the residents who have to have raw sewage in their garden, and this is only going to make it worse, not better. The principle of development is there. The housing I'm happy with. I think it's a great scheme. I would rather go for the scheme suggested by the place design team rather than what the applicant is suggesting. But the biggest problem is something that I don't know how we control, but it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the ward member, please. Councillor Hadingham.
Thank you. I see there's only actually 2 objection letters, Matthew. What do you... You're saying the village is very concerned, but there's only 2, so what do you say about that?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that, this application is from a long time ago, in terms of it first came up, and at that time there was debate, and it was felt that, the village, like every village, has to say some development. The problem is, there's a pinch point in the system that all comes just by the community centre, and those poor residents suffer every year, and the matter's getting worse with more housing added to the system. So the parish council has met. It's an ongoing problem with every application that comes in. Every application that comes in, the parish council has to say the same thing. The sewage system can't cope. Anglian Water say they can. What they end up doing is sending in tankers instead of once a day. They send them in a few times a day when it's really bad water to empty the system, to try and help. But it is a big problem, and this isn't unique to Worlingworth. I know we've heard it in this committee before.
Councillor Gould, please.
Thanks very much. This is not so much a question to Councillor Hicks, but rather prompted by what he said, and I'd appreciate some advice. As Councillor Hicks has just said, this is not a unique example. In this case, while the principle of development may be one thing, I'd like to ask the officers of the scope that there is to refuse this application given the concern about flooding.
Yeah, Mr. Peyton-G, please.
Thank you. If I can highlight to members the outline planning permission, page 82, you have already imposed a planning condition on the foul water drainage to be agreed. I don't understand that to be dealt with yet. That can be dealt with at any time by the applicant, and ultimately that remains outstanding. So there is still scope there for control and involvement of the council in terms of this matter. That is already been imposed under the outline.
Are there any other questions? Okay, in that case, we're going to open debate, which should be good. So, who wants to start? Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much. Yes, like the design of this. I like the ground source heat pumps. I think it's, air source heat pumps. I do understand that they take quite a bit of electricity to run. And I'm still not absolutely sure if there's going to be solar panels fitted to the roofs, or there's not going to be any solar panels. So, yeah, so the air source heat pumps are absolutely fantastic, but they do use a lot of electricity, and I'd quite like to see solar panels to power that. But this sewerage issue, yes, we do seem to find this quite a lot in mid-Suffolk villages. People connect their storm drains to the foul drains, and the systems can't take it. They're built a long time ago. But with the conditions in place, I'd like to sort of put that to the councillors in debate. Does that protect these conditions for the sewage? Does that protect that sewage or not? Because it's I'm finding it a little bit vague that I'd like to see a condition that this can't go ahead unless the sewage problem's sorted out, but I'm not sure if these conditions actually say that.
Mr. Papenji.
Well, there's two elements here. First of all, we've already imposed a condition on foul water to be agreed, and essentially what we're dealing with there in terms of the detail is that it needs to mitigate the burden of this development, and we would need to be satisfied of that. The second point is to impose a further condition or any other condition in terms of foul water drainage onto this reserve matters application. We would have a bit of a disconnect between what we're dealing with before us, which is appearance of the buildings and the layout, to what is more of a technical issue of detail that should have been resolved really at the outline principle stage, of whether the development is capable to be there in the first place. I think I'll leave that alone for the minute, and I'll come back to it if I have to. But as far as we are concerned, we already have the control in place. So to add further control, we're not quite sure what we're adding control to. What more control can we add?
Councillor Mellon, please, followed by Councillor Stringer, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of pick up on that condition from the outline, just so we can be clear, how is that condition going to be discharged? Is it only on the say-so of Anglian Water that they've sorted it, or is there something wider that will give us some sort of reassurance that the problem is going to be not exacerbated by this development?
This is going to be fun, isn't it? Ultimately, we consult two main, well, possibly three, when we get one of these type of conditions in. We do consult Anglian Water. We ask for their expert advice. They are the experts. We're not experts in the field. We're planning officers. We ask for their expert advice. We would ask our environmental health colleagues as well to pick up any amenity issues of that particular point, and on occasion we will also ask our building control colleagues as well, because obviously drainage is part of their remit ultimately under building regs. So armed with that advice, we will consider all those views to make that decision ultimately.
Councillor Stringer.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just to re-rehearse the old chestnut about Anglian Water. Anglian Water is a privatised utility. Part of it becoming privatised meant it had to deliver infrastructure, no matter how much of it came forward, because it has the ability to levy fees on those connecting, which it does with alarming regularity. So it's not a planning consideration. Flooding in general is, and they can object if a design is going to be somehow overwhelming to a current system, but they cannot in law say we can't cope because in law they've said they're already going to. So it does make that difference. So if we want to be able to change that, we need to change the incorporation of how it's privatised. Two things for me. The planning for climate change in the MPPF is quite clear under paragraph 150. New development should be planned in ways that reduce greenhouse emissions, such as through its location, orientation and design. The design here I don't have a huge problem with. I have a slight issue with one part of the design, which I'll get to in a minute. But the orientation in this instance is particularly poor. There are 40 plus roofscapes here. Only 6 of them face south. So technically, you've got a heavy load coming in terms of electricity, which is a good thing. Air source heat pumps, electric charging points, all very good. But by this design, you are committing them to be able to not generate electricity in the future. And that's just poor design. And that's in the MPPF, paragraph 150. This keeps coming up again and again, and developers need to realise that having a balcony and a countryside view should be seen as secondary to orientate the building in a correct way that it can sustainably contribute to a sustainable society in the future. One other small point is, I take it the balconies on these are glass.
So we'll just get some confirmation of that. Nicole, are they glass? Thank you.
Right. It would be helpful if you are going to approve this that they have a condition about clarification on them, so that the birds that are going to be living in the trees you're about to plant don't just clatter into them and kill themselves. So that would be really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
I think it's a fair point, and I'm sure that you've taken that on board. Thank you. Mr. Papenji, do you have a comment? Okay. Any other points of debate? Yeah, Councillor Warboys.
Well, it's just really emphasising, I think, the fact the concerns about the discharge of the sewage and whether or not an Anglia Water seem to be caught in a situation where they have to accept that they can cope with extra sewage without actually any proof that they will be able to cope with the extra sewage, which I think is the issue on which this sort of rests, doesn't it? But it can prove without doubt that it can cope with the extra sewage, particularly if it's going to, the mitigation appears to be pumping the sewage into the existing system. The other matter is, I mean, it's from the heritage team, and in particular about the fencing on the western boundary, which does create a very urban landscape. I accept that the environment team have suggested this as a means of mitigating the noise from the existing workshops. And here again we have a little bit of a conflict where you've got workshops which existed in beyond the building line in more or less open countryside alongside heritage assets are now being incorporated into an urban situation where they have housing next to them. My argument would be perhaps less noise should be emitted rather than measures to sort of control the amount of noise and the impact on the residents who will be there in future. I think there is some conflict there, and I think possibly I'd like to see some other form of fencing. I've seen this happen in rural situations. It does have a terrible visual impact. Admittedly, it is next to a workshop. Those are my points at the moment. I'm not convinced that we should be actually just accepting this layout and these proposals, simply because I think there are some questions there in particular in terms of its deliverability.
Anybody else want to debate? Yeah, Councillor Hadingham, thank you. Don't be shy, guys.
I think this is a tricky one because, as Andrew says, unfortunately, the orientation is not with the sun, although I do like the designs of the, and I think, you know, I like a lot of glass. I think, you know, if you can get heat from the sun, that's got to be a good thing. And it's refreshing, frankly, to see a different design being used than the usual boxes. But like everyone else, I'm concerned with the flooding that's happened in my parishes. You know, I don't like the fact that Anglia Water seem to think that everything's okay when it is not okay. But there has only been 2 objections from the locals. I don't know if they're the people that are directly affected by the flooding. And if they're saying that it's okay, I think we're going to really have to scratch our heads to come up with a reason why we can't go for this. So I think it is tricky, but yeah.
Anybody else? I'll make a couple of points. The first thing is we've not had an answer to Councillor Hick's point about the pumping station. So Nicole, if you'd like to give us that answer, that'd be really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just reverting back to the flood risk assessment that's submitted with the application. The engineers have suggested that due to the levels across the site falling away slightly from Shop Street, foul water will need to be pumped to the existing public sewerage system. And that's why the pumping station is proposed. And that is through discussions with Anglian Water.
Thank you, and hopefully that satisfies your question. Yeah, thank you. So I've listened to the debate so far, and my own points are this, that, yeah, I think it would be hard to refuse this, given what we've been given in the papers. And I accept the points from the ward councillor in the fact that he's experienced it, and he's seen it, and so have the residents. But I also get your point that actually there's only 2 objections, although it was quite some time ago. So there's all this conflict going on. I do get the point from Councillor Stringer about the solar panels. It is disappointing, but I also understand your point in the fact that people do like to look over the open countryside, and they like south-facing gardens. And right or wrong, it's about the buyer that, you know, you've got to make it attractive to sell the property. But I do get the environmental point, absolutely, and I think it's a bit of a shame, actually, that you've not looked at solar panelling, because you're right, the heat source pumping uses a lot of electricity. So the compromise would surely be some form of solar system to substitute that electricity and provide it. Yeah, the glass, I get, we are talking about reserved matters. I think that comes under appearance, and I think that your point, Councillor Stringer, is valid. So I'd like that within the conditions. Because I think it is important, and why shouldn't we do that as part of the appearance? I do like the site though, and I do like the open area, and I do like the amount of trees that are being planted. Coming back to Councillor Warboys' point about the western side, I noticed in the conditions that there is a point about the additional boundary details on the southeastern edge. It'd be really nice to have something there about the western edge as well. And it talks about should members consider it necessary. Well, I do think it's necessary, personally. So I'd like an extra condition in there for the western boundary as much as the southeastern boundary. So more detail and more effort in making that right, especially with the workshop. I'm glad you brought it up, because that is a factor. Okay, that's my points. So back to debate. Anybody? Councillor Hadingham.
Well, perhaps to provoke things, but anyway, so I'm going to propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation and approve this.
Thank you. We do have a proposer. Seconder, Councillor Caston.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to second that.
Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, I would like to speak against the proposal, if I may. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll take this off.
Please do.
We really have to take a stand against poor design. The MPPF clearly tells us to do it. And here we go again, another development where views across countryside are put ahead of sustainably being able to live in these houses in the future, and preclude forever putting solar panels on them. That's why orientation is so important in the MPPF. It's the single biggest thing you can do to make a development more sustainable in the future. If the built form is to a high standard, which I believe these ones will be anyway, but if they're orientated in the right way, that makes a significant difference to their footprint. If each of these houses has one electric car and a air source heat pump, that will be almost a megawatt of electricity. That's one of the turbines at Airfield will purely be needed for this site because it cannot wash its own face in the future. I love the modern design, I love all of that, but I frankly cannot sit here and commit this extra drain on our future without making a stand. Thank you, Chair.
No, valid points. Mr. Popengy, please.
May I just clarify the proposal that's been first and seconded? So are we talking about there's a grant planning permission as per the papers, but obviously without further agreement of the flood team? And are you looking at those two additional conditions? One was for glazing to be designed for bird impact avoidance and notwithstanding details, west boundary details to be further agreed by officers. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, yes. And which landscaping scheme? A or B?
Councillor Hadingham, over to you, proposer.
I'm going to say I like the one with more trees. Oh, yeah, no, I've seen enough. I like the one with the more trees, you know.
Councillor Custon, happy with option B?
Yes, I think the councillor's made a good choice with that one. For me, there was only one choice from the start.
Thank you. And can you also both confirm you're happy with both additional conditions?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I do get Councillor Stringer's point, just in summary on this one. It is a shame. But I also understand modern solar panels. In fact, you don't always have to be pointed south, because actually it's not direct sunlight, it's light on most of the modern stuff. So effectively, you could do something to fix this. Yeah, and I'll give you time to just come back on it.
Sustainable construction condition attached to the outline permission already. Some details have already been submitted in support of that condition, so there is quite a detailed energy report on there, which is where the figures that Mr Cameron quoted regarding the air source heat pumps come from, and they do demonstrate quite significant exceedance of Part L, the building regulations, and they do confirm that solar PVs are viable on this site, but obviously they're not proposed currently. But you're quite right, Chair, that it is viable and it is possible despite the roof orientation.
So, on that, Mr Popengy, is there a possibility of condition that would further investigate the use of solar panels or a solar energy system for those houses?
This is the point I hate being a planning officer. No. The trouble here is we're dealing with not the principle of something being put onto this site. We're dealing with what it looks like and layout, and I can't add essentially a plant to every house because that wasn't part of what this proposal is. I appreciate. I'm just trying to think, in terms of the outline planning, just one moment, sorry. In terms of
it's important, thank you. Just take your time.
Anything in here? Right, so under your outline planning consent, you have got already condition 4, page 78, prior to the commencement of development, agreement measures to improve sustainability of development. I'm not sure. Dan, has that come forward for agreement? I thought that might have done separately. Can I just check? I'll check. No, I just need to check if an application has been made. That's condition 6. That's not it.
We do have an application for condition 6 on the outline. It's DC 21-02531. It's part of a suite of conditions for surface water drainage and foul water drainage as well.
Yes, but we don't have anything on condition 4 as yet. which is sustainability. Do we?
DC 21-02532.
So that's already been agreed,
No, those conditions haven't been discharged.
but they're with us still.
Yeah, they're with us still.
Okay. So we can't, I don't think we can put anything on the specific reserve matters, but we do have a condition that we are still considering in terms of the sustainability aspects of the site as a separate planning matter. We can only say that officers will bear in mind your conversations today in considering of that application.
If that's all we can do, it's all we can do, but I want them to strongly listen to what we said today, and I want that minuted, please. Thank you.
Chairman, I'll just say I agree. I think Mr Pateman-G is quite correct legally.
Thank you. That's where we need to be. Councillor Stringer?
Can I just make a small point? This is, you're in this bind because of, I don't want to be rude, is because the design is poor. It hasn't even, because it's used a traditional style garage even, they could have done an innovative design on the garage that had a single pent roof on it that could have faced south. So that could have added to the solar possibilities of the future of these dwellings, along with perhaps battery storage in the garage. That's probably where the electric hookup's going to be for the cars. This has not been thought through. According to paragraph 150, it becomes poor in terms of that orientation and the overall design. That's the point I'm making, and I'm not trying to be rude because a lot of the design is very, very good. It's just that first principle of orientation has not been well thought through. Thank you.
No, you're not being rude. You're absolutely right in what you're saying. But as I said to you, you don't have to point south anymore. Councillor Caston.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak to Councillor Stringer's talking on this solar panel issue, and I do completely understand what he's saying. Solar panels don't necessarily go that well with air source heat pumps, because the time that you need the heat is usually in the winter when the sun's very low in the sky, so only a south-facing roof will do, but that sun's gone down by 5 o'clock. This time of year you'll be generating until 9-10 o'clock at night, but you don't need the heating. So renewable-wise, we're relying on the wind farms outside, and I don't want to go too far away from the point. What I wanted to say was I think Councillor Stringer makes a really good point on this, and I would say that's a bad design, that these roofs can't pick up the solar heat quite as well with these air source heat pumps. But for me, it's not something that I would turn this down on. So he makes a good point, but I couldn't refuse it on those grounds.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys?
But as well as before we sort of plunge down the route of having more trees, I just want to draw members' attentions to Place Services comments on page 22. And they quite rightly look forwards to the future when these trees grow. And their words are, the larger form trees of the proposed trees could in time create a dense canopy, effectively blocking out light to the grass areas and paths, which would result in the loss of amenity and the space's open character. These are trees in effectively a sort of park within a small estate, and not an appropriate place for something which is more like a small wood or coppice. It's a parkland situation where distinct trees would be aesthetically better, but also it would preserve the grassland and the flowering grasses, and which are also effective stores of carbon. So I think we do need to seriously consider Place Services' recommendations here.
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Anybody else? Councillor Norris.
Yeah, I'm very undecided on this one, I have to confess. I do understand Councillor Stringer's point entirely, and I have considerable reservations regarding the sewerage flooding issue. I can understand, and I have extend my sympathies to the residents. It's very unpleasant. But at the same time, with the reassurances that the planning officer has, chief planning manager has given, regarding any measures that can be taken regarding the sewerage as far as is possible, I'm finding it very difficult to find sufficient reasons to actually refuse this application. But I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, please? Councillor Hadingham.
Oh, I'm thinking on what Councillor Warboys has said about the trees, and just wondering if we whether, possibly made a too quick assumption of, more trees is always a good thing. And I have to say that I do like woodland, as an amenity. And so I'm just I'm having a think. Does anyone else want to speak about the two landscape? For or against whether we go for the more trees and the possibly more of a woodland look, or the sort of more opened meadowland look. James, what do you think?
Councillor Caston.
I'm still for the Plan B. I don't think, I can understand what place services are saying. I don't think it's that much of an issue. I don't think there's enough there to turn it into a woodland. I think the sun moves gradually during the day, and the grass will get whatever it needs with those trees. It's not going to be a solid canopy by the looks of things, but I wouldn't mind looking at the plan again, just with that in mind. And I think it's quite an important part of this application.
Can I just ask, there's a recommendation in there about removing trees from gardens. Is that the case? We're not going to have trees in the gardens, or is it as per the plan where some have?
Sorry, yes,
Okay. Councillor Hadingham.
Can I just ask, if the trees fail, do they have to be... Right, okay, so what's planted is going to, has to have the... Keep growing. Okay, cool, thanks.
Can I just come in on that, Chair, if I may? So in terms of the landscaping condition, there's a 5 or normally a 10-year these days requirement to replace anything that fails within that time frame. After 10 years, there's no obligation to replace. We can't preserve a tree forever in that context. Just looking at the outline permission, the outline secures a public open space. It doesn't secure what size it should be. That is a matter of the reserved matters in front of you. I'm probably adding my professional opinion here. In my experience on looking at many applications over the years, this is a reasonable size public open space. It's actually quite big compared, considering the size of the actual development that it's connected to. And so I offer my professional opinion that the space with the number of trees, either more or less, is reasonably substantial given the scale of development. I hate to say it, I don't think there's a wrong decision here in the context that we're discussing, but I'll leave that with members to debate further.
Okay, well, if James is happy with the more trees option, then we'll stick with that.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of clarity required, if possible. There's a huge number of concerns that the place services have raised on page 22 and 23. Are these all resolved in the condition from the outline, or does there need to be some further condition on this current permission?
So you're talking about things like fibrous trees and stuff?
Yeah, there's a whole load of different sort of little bitty bits where they've sort of picked holes in what's been proposed. I'm not quite sure how those are all sort of resolved.
So, in addition to the two option landscaping plans, they tend to deal with everything that we can see within the plans. We've also got a landscape management and maintenance schedule as well. So everything about sort of planting mix, we've got native species in there. We've got things appropriate to the area, and you know, our feature trees are sort of things like oaks and things that sort of would be found within the landscape there. And then we have the rest of the detail provided within the plan. The actual outline requires the details of the landscaping to come in. I think we have a condition recommended at the end of the report that talks about landscape management and enhancement. So that additional plan would then speak to that detail.
So they would all be resolved, or the majority would be resolved?
The majority have already been resolved within the plans that are before you. The only one that wouldn't be is the one that speaks to the amount of trees on the piece of public open space, if you chose to go with option B.
Okay.
Councillor Stringer.
Yep. Sorry to keep dipping in, but it does follow on from what Councillor Caston said about the mismatch of the sun and the need for heat. Of course, the paragraph before paragraph 150 in the MPF deals with this. This is the other extreme, is too much heat. I mean, what I see on the plans on 104 is a completely south-facing glazed elevation. I see no screening or shade on this. Therefore, on a day like today, the reverse will be true. There'll be no need for central heating, and there'll be masses of passive solar gain coming in through that glass. So it will probably have to have at least forced ventilation, requiring more power, or at worst, even air conditioning, because of the orientation and design. Thank you.
Thank you. And conversely, of course, they won't need the heating on. So it's a nightmare, isn't it? Because it's 50-50 on both. I think we're coming to the end of the debate, actually. I think everybody's been given the opportunity to speak. I'm a fan of B, and the reason for that is because we spend lots of time in this council chamber arguing there aren't enough trees. We're not planting enough. And here we are with a plan that promotes more trees, and we're like arguing against that. It's very difficult. And all the points are relevant. But we do have a proposer, we do have a seconder, and I am going to move to the vote. So therefore, I'll ask the Area Planning Manager to read out the proposal, including the conditions, on the table before we go to a vote.
If it's okay, Mr. Payment G, I've got that because I've put it into the vote, Chair. So if I read out what is in the vote for this full member. So that application DC 21 00755 be approved as detailed in the officer recommendation, with option B of the landscaping scheme being chosen, and the additional conditions as follows. Condition on glazing to be designed for bird impact avoidance to be agreed by officers, and notwithstanding details of the west boundary details of fencing and landscaping to be agreed by officers.
Proposer, are you happy with the readout of the conditions as well? Yes, I am. Thank you. And therefore we'll go for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. If members could please go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner of their agenda, of today's agenda, and go to the subsection on voting/attendance, and then click on the vote that is in progress that's shown in a light blue colour. Councillor Carson, can I please take your vote?
Thank you for the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Chair, all votes have now been received with Councillor Carston's vote as well being taken verbally. So that is 4 votes for, 3 against and 1 abstention. It will show on your mon.gov as drawn only because Councillor Carston's vote has been taken verbally.
I understand that, therefore that is carried. Thank you. We will take a short 5-minute leg stretch. Please fill up your glasses of water, and if we can come back in, let's make it 10 minutes, come back in on the hour, please. Item 7B, which is DC 2102067, land at Blackacre Hill, Bramford Road, Great Blakenham in Suffolk. And I'll ask the case officer, Catherine Hale, to introduce the application to the committee. Catherine.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So this is a reserve matters application for a warehouse at land at Blackacre Hill, Great Blakenham, also known as Port Warren Logistics. So obviously Great Blakenham is a key service centre. The principle of development has already been established via previous outline permission and section 73 that was before members last November. So you may briefly recall the history for this one. So the late papers, just to remind you that originally in the report, it was concluded by officers that the banding, the coloured boarding should be changed. Upon further discussion with the agent, we're actually in agreement that the colour cladding should remain as per the existing unit that's already been erected, Unit 4, with the light boarding at the bottom, working its way up to the darker boarding. Within this slideshow, a couple of slides later, I'll go on to explain why we've decided that actually it's better to keep that existing theme and go against kind of what the parish council are looking for. So this is a site location plan. You can see on the screen the unit 3 here. This is the one we're looking at today. Unit 4 has already been approved and is built and actually occupied at present. So this is obviously the aerial map of the wider site, and then this is just obviously in context with Great Blakenham itself to the north. Snow Oasis would be over here, this development coming forwards. There aren't any constraints within the site. Again, this is just a close-up shot of the layout. The access has already been agreed via the outline and the amended section 73. These are the proposed elevations. So the land slopes from the road and gradually goes northwards, upwards, and this proposal is seeking to erect a building that will be 19 metres above the finished floor level. Unit 4, which it will sit behind, is approximately, I think 22 or 23 metres above. So this will sit in the street scene a lot lower. This is just LiDAR imagery to show, obviously the star is the site, and the green arrows just show where the land starts to rise because it's within a valley. So the red indicates the main close-up views of the site that you'll get from the road. So this is existing frontage, and you can see in the background Bolton Waste here, which is to the north of the site, and obviously the buildings will be here behind this existing screening. Again, this just demonstrates the proposed planting on the right. So there's an element outside the red line plan, which from a previous image shows all the existing hedgerow, and also within the site they're proposing additional landscaping and screening. This is basically the elevation. Obviously on the previous plans it shows against a white background, so the warehouse does look quite stark. However, it will actually appear behind trees, so it should get to it. It will actually appear in the visual landscape similar to this. Obviously this is a mock-up, but you'll only see the very tops of the warehousing. Again, this is just a view. So this slide goes to show the differences in the colour boarding. So on the left-hand side, you can see with the darker colour on top, and on the right, you can see where it's got the lighter colour. Originally in my report, the committee report, it was recommended that lighter goes on top. Within these close-up views, you can understand the rationale behind that because it blends in with the sky, whereas the dark does tend to stick out. However, that is purely from the junction, and therefore, when you look at it from a wide escape, this is a long view, so you can see the kind of pale boarding where it would sit. So it would be more obvious if the lighter boarding was at top compared to the darker, whereas here you can see it kind of blends in. So I'll just go back So that would be if it was light at the top, and that would be if it was dark. It blends into the existing treescape. Also, just for context, for waste building is obviously dark greys at the top. And another, surrounding site it would fit. In terms of drainage, there is at the moment a holding objection from Suffolk County Council Floods because they don't believe there's enough drainage within the red line site plan. Whilst that's noted, this whole this application is also being brought forward in phases. There are other phases, and the existing outline and subsequent section 73, followed by an extension to the Port 1 site, which again has already been before members last year and has been approved, encompasses a wider site-wide drainage strategy where there is considered to be sufficient suds drainage. Furthermore, the section 73 and outline had conditions on it, and I believe there is a DOC in at the moment to also discharge the suds and the drainage system. Therefore, the recommendation is grant with a couple of conditions, but a lot of the conditions have again previously been dealt with via the section 73.
Thank you, Catherine. Just like to say well done on the slide presentation. I think the movement there, slide 15 onwards, really helped sort of bring things to light. So that was really good. Thank you. Are there any questions, please, for the case officer? Councillor Stringer.
Wrong one. Sorry, Catherine. Can you just go over that colour thing again? Because I understand what you're saying, but it went quite quickly. And for me, the trees disappeared into sort of a grey murk. If I could look at that again, that would be most helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. So these ones? Yeah. Okay, so this is a long distance view. I do believe in the late papers that were provided to members, there was a couple more comprehensive issues and it did pictures, sorry, and it did explain the change. But you can just about see there's a kind of white strip along here. This would be the colour of Unit 3 if we were to go with the current condition that I've suggested, where the light boarding, which I think is known as an oyster colour, it is on the top. So you could just about, with Unit 3, you just about see it above the tree line. The darker grey up the top here is obviously where the existing Unit 4 is. So you'd have the existing Unit 4 dark grey, and then you'd suddenly have a white or a lighter colour of boarding along here, followed by the trees. So if you have it dark, you can kind of, the image isn't great in the sense that we'll kind of discuss this last minute, so it's not a CGI sort of image, but you can see the strip just along here. So it just blends in completely with Unit 4. I'll just go back again. If you just kind of look, can you see ever so slightly? So when looking from a longer view, when the darker boarding's on top, as previously agreed for Unit 4, it blends into the wider sort of unit behind, the waste incinerator plant to the left there, and kind of the trees and existing vegetation.
Just come back on it.
Yeah.
Surely if it were lighter at the top, the light would blend in with the sky, as does because the energy from waste plant, that elevation there is not a dark boarding, that's a reflective metal surface. So I think is that not the point that depends which thing you're contrasting it with, doesn't it? And I would have imagined if it were lighter, there's a lighter band to the right of those trees. I take it that's a roof.
That will be there's more obviously units to come forwards as part of further reserve matters for the previous extension to the site under DC 20-01175, which was granted earlier in the year. That proposes another number of units which will eventually sit in the landscape along here. And therefore, if this colour option where the light at the top is then brought for the whole site, and you'd see it on all the units, because obviously you're not going to keep changing the pattern of boarding each time a unit comes forward, then you'd also have the white line all along across there. And the argument is that then yes, close up it blends into the sky, but from a longer view, the white here you can see is quite a contrast compared to if it was dark.
Okay.
So, and obviously with the waste and energy, although it is reflective, it's reflective, and the this boarding option is cladding, and it's a coloured cladding, so it offers no reflective purpose.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councillor Hadingham.
Thank you. Although Jason has a holding objection, you're saying that's all been conditioned in previously, so it's all, you're happy?
Yeah, so it's being conditioned as part of both the existing outline in section 73 on this particular site, and then the extended part, it's also being conditioned, and the whole point is it's a wider sustainable drainage system in place. It's not just purely for this unit. It affects all units, and it's been conditioned. I believe the DOC is in at the moment, and I think Suffolk Floods have asked for some more information, so it's not quite ready to be discharged, but we're working on it, and obviously as soon as they're happy, it will get discharged. So for this purpose and this application, we're content that it's acceptable.
No other questions? Thank you. Okay, so moving on to public speakers. We don't have a representative from the parish, an objector or a supporter, so I'll now ask the applicant and agent to speak. Nick Davey and Maxwell Hembry, you have 3 minutes between you to address the committee. Please let me know when you're about to start.
Thank you, members. I'm going to take the 3 minutes up. Mr. Hembry's here in case you have any questions for the developer. What your officer said is that, quite correct, as you have a reserve matters application before you today for the second unit at Port 1. Now, the tenant is signed up, and if permission is granted, contracts worth over 9.8 million will be placed this week with a view to getting on site and completing that building in early 2022. And once it's completed, there'll be 250 people employed there, and that will add to the 150 within Unit 4. As agreed with the Council, the junction onto Bramford Road and the electric shuttle bus are on course to be in place before the end of the year, before Unit 3 opens. We've also agreed to make a 7-figure investment so that waste from the adjacent waste to energy plant can be converted into power and brought onto the park. And that scheme will create another 250 jobs. And that initiative complements the photovoltaic cells on the roofs of the buildings, the use of low energy lighting, and the installation of some electric vehicle charging points. With agreed biodiversity enhancements and the planting of what will eventually be over 2,000 trees, Port 1, when completed, will be one of the most sustainable and green logistics parks in the UK. We submitted a number of applications to get this scheme off the ground, phase 3. As your officer said, we have an application to discharge the drainage condition. That's being discussed now, and drainage isn't technically before you as part of this reserve matters application, but the whole site covers 25 hectares. We have more than sufficient land to create a solution, and that will be forthcoming. We've also discussed the other matter that sort of cropped up in the last few days has been the banding of the colours. From the very outset, we started discussing this with the council in 2013, and from the very outset, one of the council's key objectives was to make sure that this scheme sat well in long distance views, particularly when seen from the other side of the valley. So the scheme, the buildings are cut into the landscape to make sure that they are all lower than the trees and the land behind it when seen from the eastern side of the valley. They are not seen against sky from that point of view. None of the buildings are. They're seen against the trees, and that's why the dark colour at the top works. And that image that we had of the long distance view, that shows you Unit 4, the one that's been constructed. And that really blends in, and from the Clayton side, you can hardly see that building. So we're convinced, I mean, we can do the banding either way. If members want it the other way, we'll do it that way. But we're convinced that the original rationale agreed in this chamber, or your previous chamber, is the right approach, and it is better to protect the long-distance views and mitigate impact on the wider landscape. And that's particularly as there aren't that many local views. It really is around that junction. That's the only place you'll see the buildings against the sky.
You have to quickly summarise, we're at 3 minutes.
So, to summarise, following the completion of Unit 4 and the announcement that Port 1 is now part of Freeport East, we are experiencing unprecedented demand for the site. Virtually every unit is now signed up, so if you grant consent for this one, we will be back in a few months with the rest of the phases. This scheme should be something hopefully everyone can be proud of.
Thank you. So, committee, do you have any questions for the agents? Yeah, Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. You made a comment about the an agreement with the energy from waste plant. I didn't quite catch what you said. I wonder if you could explain that to us more fully. And some disappointment as a local member, and I don't know anything about that, and neither does the parish council.
Can I defer to the developer, Mr. Maxwell, Embry?
We have an ongoing discussion at the moment with Suez, who obviously work for Suffolk County Council, and there are certain confidentiality agreements that we've had to sign for that. But it's always been the intention to use the power that's available under a private wire arrangement, which is up to 10 meg, and we have committed to them that we will be paying for all of the infrastructure costs to take that power into the site to be able to provide low-cost energy directly across from the waste-to-energy plant into our site, and that is a seven-figure sum which we have told them we will be paying for.
Thank you. Councillor Field? Thank you. Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask a further question? When would that be tapped into? What would be the plan to connect that?
At the moment, we're in discussions to try and sort out the design of the scheme, but I think we've got an interested party in terms of the exporter of the power, because it makes sense to them. It doesn't have to go into the grid and get eroded away, and it's less efficient. Plus the fact that there's an added benefit for them because they get extra revenue into the county, and we're talking, seven-figure sum every year. And as far as our occupiers are concerned, they're very, very keen to use that power because there's considerable saving. Because if you look at your average electricity bill, it's roughly about a third of it is the generating cost, the rest of it is taxes. By importing it directly into the site, the producer gets more money and the user makes a saving. It's a win-win situation for everybody for the next 20 years, hopefully.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, we're going to move to the ward member, which is Councillor Field. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Obviously pleased to hear that development. I was just going to point out that the outline approval, which established the principle of development on Blackacre Hill for employment use, was based on the access to the A14 the site enjoys. That's a short, about 680 metre stretch of dual carriageway. The adjacency to other industrial plant, for instance the energy from waste plant, and the low number of dwellings that are adjacent to the site. There's about 7 within 120 metres, the rest are a lot further away. Clearly that established the principle that a development here was fully acceptable, and I wouldn't reach to challenge that in any way. However, there were a few points in the report that somewhat surprised me, just if I can run through those. To an extent because they're the sort of things that occur in many of our reports. I was somewhat surprised at the regard given to the sport neighbourhood plan. We want neighbourhood plans taken into account, but that parish is separated from Great Blakenham by Little Blakenham and Bramford, and it's some 3.7 kilometres distance from this proposed development. So I don't see the relevance. The presence of a designated enterprise area in its sport is noted, but I could find no emphasis in your report that Port 1 is now part of the Felixstowe Harwich Freeport, which seems somewhat important. However, I was going to say I'm pleased to see the comments of the Parish Council have been considered for the colour scheme. And I now hear that's no longer true as of yesterday or so. And I have no great axe to grind on that point, other than it's something one should communicate to local people. If they understand why you're doing it, you don't get resistance, and we could all do with less resistance to planning applications, I feel. The holding objection from SCC Floodwater Management, who are a highly competent team, appears somewhat to be dismissed, and I hope the committee will investigate that judgment and ensure that it's justified. The second paragraph on page 116 shouldn't be ignored. SCC Highways make no comment on the congestion that currently occurs at the Caden junction with the A14, an opportunity that was ignored at the outline stage and one which will no doubt return to haunt local road users as Port 1 site is fully developed. Valley Ridge holiday facility and ski slope generates considerable visitors and employer traffic. Presumably it's too late to take any action today, but I think that's still an issue of regret. The heritage team make no comment and the report indicates no listed buildings nearby. However, Mid-Suffolk mapping shows 4 which have employment uses within 270 metres, and I think they're on the map on slide 5. The recommendation of place services for a condition involving landscape details does not appear to have been followed through, or I couldn't see it in the list of recommendations. I'd also say the arguments of page in 11.1 to 11.5 that the impact of the development on the residential amenity is not significant appears to me strained. This is clearly a major building close to dwellings that have previously enjoyed an essentially rural outlook, and it's difficult to accept that the proposal will not affect the privacy of nearby properties nor their visual amenities. However, the detriment to residential amenity produced should be balanced against the wider advantages of the site, and I feel I accept that this is a reasonable choice. The requirements for the noise management plan is clearly appropriate, although it will be difficult to deliver acceptable noise levels with the impact of reversing bleepers considered. However, I do hope that condition, that requirement in the approval, if you choose to go that way, is strong and enforceable. I would also say on the affordable, on the solar energy point of view, that we appear certainly in my district ward to be set on converting hundreds of acres of farmland to solar farm purposes, and I wondered whether we're actually taking advantage of the considerable area of roof that exists in this development, which is actually orientated south, and whether we're making full advantage of that as a, if you like, free acreage that we can use. Just to summarise, therefore, in principle, I support the application for reserve matters approval, as does the parish council, providing the conditions which you place on the application include those that come from our consultees, all of the ones from our consultees. I would wish the highways condition issues to be addressed, but I'm sure that to hope for that is fantasy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Any questions for the ward member, please? Okay, in that case, let's open up for debate. Who's going to start? Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a huge amount of benefits from this. I like the ideas of jobs in the region. I like the idea that it could become one of the greenest industrial estates in the UK. I think that's fantastic with the tree planting. I don't think the cladding is the right way around, personally. I think lighter at the top would mitigate the visual impact of this quite substantially. The biggest impact of this, I think, is from the B113. I know we can look at from the surrounding area, but there will be far more people going past on the B1113, and the angle that they'd be looking up at this, that white cladding at the top, I think would mitigate that impact hugely. I'm from around that area, and a lot of people have said on social media that they think it is the wrong way around. But I think that's something that maybe we can talk about later. When this came round for outline, I think we had this solar panel conversation, and we were told that because there wasn't a huge amount of consumption, it didn't need solar panels all over it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember that that statement being made. So I do think we're missing a trick with solar panels, but I do understand that this has a really unique energy connection to a energy from waste centre, which is fantastic. Like, not wasting money through the grid is fantastic. But with the solar panels, I do think that we've got a massive area there that could be utilised, and it does just seem like the right thing to do. But that's for councillors to discuss. But apart from that, yeah, I think this is a really sensible development in the right place, in the Freeport, and economically for the area, for jobs, and just even just like reducing transport distances and from ports and things. I think it's I think it's really good. But I will just leave those points with councillors for debate. The cladding, which way around that should be, and maybe the solar issue.
Thank you, Councillor Caston. I'm sure Mr Pope-McGee will come in if I'm wrong, but I don't believe under reserve matters that the solar panels can be part of it.
Can I ask
We'll let Mr Pope-McGee and Mike come to you.
Could I ask the case officer just to comment on that, because you're aware of what's actually going on there?
Yeah, so I believe that there will be a photovoltaic roof. I don't know, but it is for this unit. I don't know whether it will be for other units coming forward. I presume it would be. But yeah, any questions over solar panels is probably best directed to the agent, but I'm pretty sure that they're part of it for this unit.
But in terms of conditioning that extra bit of proposal onto a reserve matters application, no, Chair, to be consistent obviously with the application we just dealt with, is not something we'd say is connected to the appearance and layout and scale of what's before members.
Correct. I'm pretty sure it's not part of reserve matters. The agent, if you could give us some information on that, that'd be really welcome, actually.
Size of them, the electricity draw isn't, as you would expect. There are solar panels on the roof. You have a roof plan drawing showing them. It's been submitted with the reserve matters application, and that is sufficient to power a good part of the intelligent lighting scheme within the building. Low voltage, and the lights in every aisle turn off. So if there's no activity in the aisle, no one's going to pick the stock. The lights go off after 1 minute, and then they're on sensors and come on. So everything is being done to keep the power to the minimum. And on the original outline application, there is a sustainability condition, which includes provision and implementation of energy resource measures. That is in with the council now. So sort of for take Wells would really be part of that discussion rather than the reserve matters.
Yeah, agreed. And just for Councillor Caston, obviously the addition of solar panels, that's outside of this, so it is what it is. Councillor Stringer.
Yes, Chair, that was the point I was going to make. The original outline would have had a condition to provide an element of solar panels on this roof. Beyond that, that's a commercial decision according to our policies, even though we may wish it, and it would make absolutely common sense to do so, because if you're already building a roof...
And at the end of the day, get your point.
But at least 10% of the power consumption should be from solar within your outline permission.
Perfect, thank you. So clear on that. Councillor Caston.
So just the point I was making in outline, we were told 10% would be put on there, and that was enough to cover the energy. And I feel like maybe that was a little bit misleading, that outline, and it's something that we might have to look at in the future. Sorry, I do have another point. This drainage situation, if that next phase didn't get built, would we be able to have a bond in place to make sure, if, say, the worst came to the worst and that last phase couldn't be done for whatever reason, could we have a bond in place to make sure that drainage is acceptable for that development?
That is not within your power or scope of the application before you. Can I just come back on the 10%? Yeah. I'm assuming the 10% on the original outline was based on the policy CS3, which talks about 10% decentralised energy. That's where that 10% comes from. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that was the case.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else for debate? Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, tangled up here. Too many things on my ears. I'd just like to thank the officer actually for the care which she's taken over looking at the aesthetics of the buildings. I agree with the officer and the developer that the dark band at the top would be the better solution. The reason in it for me is that these are large buildings. It's not going to be possible to sort of mitigate the size from every possible angle, and possibly looking at it from a distance is a better approach. As for looking at it from the side of the road, I think possibly you should be looking up at the buildings as you go past, so that the closer views maybe aren't that significant. But I also think this is I really welcome that we're having popular employment buildings coming forward, and these are popular from the point of people moving in. So the visual coherence of the site is really important. Aesthetically, this is a very well considered industrial site, and there's a lot of thought gone into the landscaping, and there's points in here about biodiversity and provision for plant boxes. So I think the coherence of the site is really important, which I think for me tilts the balance in favour of having the dark band at the top. As regards to the photoelectric cells, I think possibly the occupants of the buildings would be missing a trick if they didn't fit photoelectric cells on every south-facing surface possible. But that's a matter for future occupants. But those are my
good points. Thank you, Councillor Hadingham.
Thanks. I've listened to what debate there has been, and my opinion is that it's a very good, very well thought out application, and I'm happy to propose that we agree, go along with the officer's recommendation.
So take that as a proposal. Okay, proposal for recommendation of approval. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Warboys. Thank you. Anybody else wish to enter debate? Cool. So one of my jobs in the military was a counter surveillance instructor, and it was all about camouflage. And it does seem a little bit odd that we have green at the top. And I'm like, when I first saw this, I'm like, I just can't get my head around this. That's mad. The sky's blue. But it is all about the valley, and it's all about backdrop. You can have a warship, and you can be right against it, and you'll see it. Go 15 miles back and come slightly up with backdrop, it disappears. And it's the same principle here. It's about the backdrop. It's about proper camouflage. I really do commend you guys for doing such an excellent job, in my opinion, on that, and also on your environmental approach to this. This is probably one of the best industrial sort of warehouse areas that I've seen come across me while I've been in planning. So well done. Yeah, happy days. Any other points? Okay, let's go to the governance officer then, go for an electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. So the vote is as laid out as follows: is that application DC 21-02067 be approved as detailed in the officer recommendation. So, if members could please go to the modern.gov app and go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner of today's agenda There will bring up the subsection of attendance/voting and will show in a light blue colour. Councillor Carston, can I please take your vote verbally?
Thank you. 4.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like me to take your vote verbally, Councillor? 4. So, Chair, that's all votes now received, with Councillor Hadingham and Councillor Carson's been taken verbally. That's 8 votes for, so is unanimously carried.
Thank you. That is carried. Is everybody happy that we continue on to the next? Okay, nobody needs a short break.
Chair, we just need to do a bit of musical chairs.
Yeah, we'll take 5 minutes in place, please, while we just sort things out. Welcome back, everybody. We'll now move to 7C, which is DC 21-00641, which is land to the east of Turkey Hall Lane, Bacton, Suffolk. And I'll now ask the case officer, Alex Scott, to introduce the application to the committee. Alex.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members, as the Chairman's just stated, this is agenda item 7C, application DC 21-00641, land to the east of Turkey Hall Lane in Bacton. The application before you is a reserved matters application for the layout, scale, appearance and landscaping relating to the erection of 51 dwellings, including 18 affordable houses and public open space, the principal of which and matters of access, which were formally agreed by committee in May of 2018. And we'll move on to the presentation. This is the location of Bacton within the district, for the avoidance of doubt for everybody, and the general location of the site within the village. This is a constraints plan of the site. Now, the site extends to approximately 3.52 hectares and would include approximately 1.13 hectares of public open space. It gives a net density of 21.34 dwellings per hectare, as is mentioned in the top of your report. So the main constraints of the site lies outside of the village settlement boundary, as indicated by the blue line on the plan, which is on the screen at the moment, and the blue indicating that Bacton is a key service centre settlement in the current plan. As mentioned in the report, the principle has already been established by way of the outline permission. So yes, that is not a consideration for today. We're on matters of layout, scale, appearance of buildings and landscaping only, just to be clear. And the main planning constraints affects the setting of a Grade 2 listed building, Turkey Hall, which is in orange. I'll try and put the laser there. So that is Turkey Hall and its curtilage, Grade 2 listed. And the main Dis to Stowmarket railway line runs adjacent to the site there. So that is what that line is there. And then there's quite a low bridging point, which cars must pass under on Pound Hill in this direction. So larger vehicles, the access would be via Turkey Hall Lane and Clay Lane, exiting just off the screen there. So those are the main constraints of the site. This is an aerial map, just showing what it looks like in photograph form and the surrounds. This is the site location plan, or the red line site plan, submitted with the application. This is the overall layout. Now, please note that this is revision P18, which differs to the layout ever so slightly, I would stress, but it is different to the one in your papers, and this was submitted by the applicant in response to comments received from County Highways, which is again in the late papers of your report. So we have this plan and those comments from Highways in the report. So this is in response to the Highways comments. And really what the applicant has included in this latest, excuse me, go back to that. There we go. Was the addition of a footpath here, and Highways have raised concerns that there was no footpath through the site for those wishing to walk up Turkey Hall Lane to the north. So that's the reason for the inclusion of that, and that has now been included. Just for information, those wishing to walk south of the site, the idea is that would be through North Close, which is here and has established footpaths, and hence the connecting footway, which is proposed in this location. And yeah, it's hoped that the majority of people would follow that established paved footpath network to avoid Turkey Hall Lane, which does have an absence of footways at present. So that's the reasons behind that. Now, public open space is in what, 3 principal locations, really. We have either side of the proposed access here, and adjacent to the existing playground, which is this blank area just outside the site here, with connections through. And that totals 1.3 hectares approximately, as per my measurements. And there are also other open areas here which are in tandem with the scheme of surface water drainage, sustainable surface water drainage, which has been considered and approved by our consultees in Suffolk County Council, the local flood authority. And these drainage basin features included within the public open space, part of that, is visual amenity primarily. And they do not need to be fenced. They are of a gradient and depth which does not need treatment, and that has been considered and agreed by Suffolk County Council Floods and Drainage and by our by our public realm team, who are happy with the landscaping schedule and maintenance plan as proposed. So that has been checked out by our consultees. So moving on, I have a closer map. This is the western portion, or the southwest portion of the site, and we already talked about the public open space adjacent to the playground, which is again in this area with a link through. Yes, boundary treatments. Now, there was a bit of concern raised by consultees with at the top of North Close with regards what boundary treatment was to be provided. Now, there is a boundary treatment plan submitted with the application, and what that states is that boundary treatments in this location, onto the public open space, and the view and aspect from existing properties. It would be a low 1.4 metre post and rail arrangement, just to define the boundary, but then that allows some amenity, some outlook for existing properties, and has the additional benefit of surveillance. So the existing properties would look out to the public open space, hoping to survey that, keep an eye out from a secure by design perspective as well. So I think that's beneficial. And then we have the eastern portion, or the northeast portion, if you will, and predominantly the market dwellings in this location. Now, I will point out there are a few instances of triple parking in the top of the site, but that's all been assessed from by County Highways, who are happy with the layout which has been provided, and as it's at the top of the cul-de-sac and not part of the main arterial road arrangement, it's considered acceptable in that location. So no objections from your officers on that, although that point is noted. This is the affordable housing layout. Now, they're indicated by blue here, and we have 10 flats split into 2 buildings, one here and one here, and 4 pairs of semi-detached dwellings as well. So that amounts to the 18 affordable units proposed. Now, there has been a bit of concern raised by some representations and indeed your own strategic housing officers on the clustering of the dwellings, and concerned that they're not pepper potted, as the term commonly used is. Reasons behind this are in terms of maintenance and keeping the types of dwellings together. I think it's your officer's consideration that it's the dwellings are not bunched up in a corner. They've got a good aspects onto public open space. Very generously sized open spaces and surroundings. A nice environment. We feel so. We feel the layout is acceptable in that regard and provides a good standard and amenity of future occupants, particularly the occupants of the affordable dwelling. So we're generally comfortable with that. And whilst the comments are noted, we don't feel that a refusal or an appeal could be sustained on that basis. So that is our recommendation to you today. Onto the proposed elevations. These are the market dwellings. So we have 33 market dwellings proposed in total throughout the site. We have the 7 design variations as shown on the plan there. A mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings. Whoops, I keep doing that, apologies. And 10 bungalows proposed. And no false chimneys, members will note. So hopefully that's to everybody's taste. Now, these are the affordable houses proposed, 18 in total. As you can see there would be 6 buildings, a mix of flats and semi-detached dwellings, and a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties in the variety shown there. And the garages, which will go alongside 27 of the dwellings proposed. 4 design variations, as you can see, the majority being the top double garage and the bottom single garages as well, with just one at plot 3 with a middle design. Oh, I should say the garages are they're parking compliant. They are compliant with SEC parking standards, so they could be used and have indeed been counted as parking spaces in terms of the layout and parking provision. This is the treatment proposed to the foul pumping station, which will be, there's a detailed plan here of its location, so adjacent to the surface water drainage. And we have the listed curtilage in this location, so your heritage officers certainly had an interest in this structure in particular. Indeed, their first response did ask for this additional detail, which the applicant has provided in their ensuing response, which is provided for you in the late papers. They're generally satisfied with the approach, the brick arrangement, screening, which is proposed, and the view which you would get from Turkey Hall, the listed buildings, screened by existing hedging. But Heritage have asked for additional details as set out in their latest response, which has led to an amended recommendation in the late papers, just subject to additional conditions as required by your heritage officers as well. So just a minor amendment to the recommendation, including that for you there. Onto the street scenes. So the street scenes are shown in this plan here. We have street scene number 1, which would look in this direction, and that is the bottom view here. We have street scene 2, which is looking in a northerly direction along this elevation. That's the long one across the top there for you. And street scene 3, looking from the public open space and the existing playground, that is the middle bar here, so that's approximately what you would see there. And then finally, number 4, which is the affordable housing from the first branch road here, opposite to the street scene 1 there. And this, for the information, is the layout which was presented, the indicative layout at outline stage, which, as you can see, is somewhat different. There is a comparison. So we had a much more, all eggs in one basket really, with the public open space, much larger site was proposed. It's now proposed to split that up into various locations, as you can see on the layout before you today. It's a view of your officers, public open space officers as well, that yes, it's more appropriate, pleasing to do it in this way, and gives a benefits to the setting of the scheme, to the street scene, a much more softer approach to Turkey Hall Lane itself, and yes, it gives greater access across the site for residents to the various public open spaces and amenities available. So yes, considered acceptable by your officers, I think, in conclusion there. Onto some artistic drawings which have recently been provided by the applicants, and these just show, gives you a sense of what the character would be of the housing estate to be provided. So quite open, green, trees, backdrop of countryside and existing and proposed public open space. Onto some photographs for you. This first one is at the top of Turkey Hall Lane and the junction of Pound Hill, and then moving down Turkey Hall Lane, and we can see the beginning of the site here. And this is the far end of the site, and you might be able to see Turkey Hall, the listed building, in the background. Now turning round and looking back down Turkey Hall Lane, the existing properties here, which will front onto the public open space to the frontage of the site, and just a view across the site to conclude. Okay, that concludes the presentation. As per your papers, officer recommendation for approval with those conditions as per the amended recommendation in the tabled papers. Thank you very much. Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for the case officer? Councillor Stringer.
I was hoping you were going to show pictures of the footpath link that you alluded to, and how people would walk from this site to the footpath network.
Sorry, I don't have any photographs of that.
You mentioned the footpath network through North Close.
Yes, I don't have any photographs of that.
I think that was illustrated on the map.
Yes, I think so.
So bring the map back up, please.
Sorry, so yes, the linking footpath from the footpath network proposed, that is not there at the moment, and linking it to the top of North Close and then connecting through.
Thank you. It's precisely where your cursor is there. That area there would be really interesting for members to know what that is.
So can you explain it, because obviously you haven't got a photograph. What does it lead into?
What it leads into, as far as I can see and remember, the top of the cul-de-sac and the existing road network and paved network, which leads to Pound Hill. You would have to cross Pound Hill at some points, but as do existing residents. It's certainly safer than coming down Turkey Hall Lane, your officers think.
So, Councillor, what we'll do when it comes to the agent, we'll ask that question. Okay?
Yes.
Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. Useful to have that back up. Sorry, Randy. The area of open space on the sort of right-hand side there, which is probably the biggest chunk of open space. I'm not clear how that is sort of surveyed by the other houses around it, because it appears to be the back of the houses at the top right, and then a sort of side from one of the other houses. It doesn't appear to be very well surveilled. The other question I have is, at the bottom, you've got your existing built form at the end of North Close. How close is the nearest new dwelling or new building to the existing? It looks very close there.
Yes, just picking up of the distance. I measure it to be approximately 5 metres from the maps provided. Now, I'm not sure how entirely accurate it would be, but yeah, those elevations which would directly face to each other, we're generally satisfied there wouldn't be a significant impact on existing residential amenity there. Our opinion. In terms of the open space to the east of the site, I believe it's that area Councilman was referring to. Yes, not as surveyed as the ones to the frontage, but then I would say neither is the existing playground to the south, and there would be a bit of surveillance from people traversing the site, and it's indicated that it would be well used. So that's no significant concerns raised in that aspect. But I do appreciate that it's not as surveyed as the ones at the front.
Councillor Warboys.
Yes, thank you. The provision of the open space, the new provision, I believe you mentioned, was it 3.5 hectares in size?
1.13 hectares.
Sorry?
Sorry. 1.13 hectares for the three principal. I measure it to be from the plans provided.
Okay, so it's the initial layout was about 3.5 then. Plan A.
No, what you're referring to the indicative layout at outline.
Yes, the outline of showing the open spaces. The one on the 2018 version, and it's the new proposed open spaces is less than half that.
In that location, yes, but it's there has been some moved to the other locations.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Yes. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket.
No, I'm just wondering about that, the size of that specific space, to give me an idea of scale relative to the rest of the buildings.
Well, we can go back to the plans if that gives you an idea.
Yes, the one where your dot is, that's about 3 acres.
So there, for comparison, outline on the left and what's proposed on the right.
So the current proposal is an open space of about 3 acres.
I'm not sure of the acreage, Councillor, but I can tell you it's 1.13 hectares. I'm not sure how that converts, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're in metric or imperial at the moment. We've got some farmers that can help out.
He's not. Andrew's nodded, so I'll take that.
Okay. Any other questions, please? Councillor Hadingham.
Thank you. Can you just leave this up? Sorry, what was I was just looking at. Originally, I appreciate that Jason has come back and has taken away the holding objection, but I was just wondering about his safety issues at the initially, because he said they should be overlooked or something, and so I was wondering what the difference was. But I can just see on this map that. So what I'm saying is, he was saying that the basins needed to be overlooked, and so this is really what I'm wanting to be looking at now. Thank you from the last one. So what I'm saying is that he was saying initially with the placing of the basins, and I can see that the basins are in the same place, but the housing has changed significantly. So I assume now he's happy with that.
Yes, indeed, yes. And as I said, satisfied it doesn't need to be fenced in any way, and it's considered safe by Suffolk County Council. So that's the information I'm getting.
Okay, looks like we're at the end of that. So we don't have an objector or a supporter, so I'll ask the parish representative, Mr. David Chambers. You have 3 minutes. Please let me know when you're about to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Afternoon. I trust members have had our detailed comments, and it was good to have the comparative plans on the screen just now that showed the difference between the proposal now and that which we supported at Outline in 2018. We do object, though, on this occasion, as it's at variance with the layout and other undertakings that were given in that documentation, and many of the concerns of the Council expressed on that occasion have not been addressed. We're also very disappointed that the application was submitted without any prior public engagement, which has been so successful with other developers that we've worked with in the village. We were impressed by the area about usable open space, as you've seen in the outline application, which is anticipated taking into our ownership for the benefit of the whole village adjacent to St Mary's playing field. And while the application states it includes provision of a large area of open space east of the site, as you see, it reduces it to less than 50% of the area previously identified. Now, St Mary's playing field, which is to the south and been referred to, is leased from the diocese, and it is possible in the future this might go for housing. And so the equivalent area offered at Outline would have ensured a continuance of a similar recreation facility if such a development took place. That contingency is now undermined by this application. The layout is significantly different from the version we saw in 2018, and as we've heard before, the affordable housing clustered together, and the block on the southern boundary is far too close to the housing on North Close. We remain concerned over vehicles accessing the site from Turkey Hall Lane and negotiating its junction with Pound Hill, and really can't see how the current roadworks design can achieve the 5.5 metres of highway along Turkey Hall Lane, and you saw the photographs, without taking more than a metre from current verges. Nevertheless, we trust that work will start before the development's allowed to commence. We've liaised with Hawley Parish Council in support of their concerns about the impact on their village of construction traffic for this and the other 5 Bacton sites moving into construction phase in the next 12 months. We want to see all construction vehicles that cannot get under our low railway bridge from the B1113 traffic route access the site via the A140 at the White House, then turning right onto Clay Lane, where one-way traffic control should be in operation, and we seek an undertaking that no articulated lorries will be accessing the site. We also propose that deliveries and removals of materials from the site are timed to avoid conflicts with school drop-offs and collections, both here and in Hawley. We urge the committee to reject this design for the site and to encourage the developer to engage with the parish council on a version including the area of recreational open space offered at the outline application stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Do we have any questions for the parish representative? No, thank you. Just bear with me while I get my page back up. Again, we don't have an objector or a supporter, so therefore I'm going to ask the agent and applicant to speak, which is Ian Hill and Peter Watlington. Again, you have 3 minutes, and please let me know when you're about to start.
Apologies for that. Accordingly, I do not wish to repeat many of the points that have already been covered. I would just like to say a few points about the scheme which, if permitted, will enable the delivery of much needed housing, including policy compliant affordable housing on a committed development site. As you've already heard, Flagship are a registered provider with a track record of providing high quality residential developments across East Anglia. Outline planning permission was granted in 2008, which secured the principle of residential development on the site, as well as details of access to the site, including works to Turkey Hall Lane. An indicative layout plan was submitted with the outline planning application, which showed how the site could potentially be developed. Flagship reappraised the site and its layout, resulting in the creation of a welcoming, legible and pedestrian-friendly residential development with a variety of landscaped open spaces forming key centrepieces throughout the site. As part of this process, rather than a single large area of open space that was shown at the outline stage, this has been split, so that rather than providing one large area, a mix of formal and informal space is provided throughout the site. As well as an area to have a kickabout, areas of informal green space are proposed. The importance of a variety of green space provision has been highlighted to us all in the last 12 months. In terms of scale and appearance, as highlighted by the images presented by your officers, the site's low density and landscape-led approach delivers a spacious and green residential setting. A high-quality material palette has been selected, and the design of each home has been carefully considered. The application is accompanied by a comprehensive landscaping scheme, which includes a significant number of trees, which has been endorsed by the Council's landscape officer. During preparation of the Reserve Matters application, Flagship Group consulted with the Parish Council prior to the submission of the application. Further post-submission engagement has been undertaken with the Parish Council, which has led directly to a number of changes, including the removal of the proposed community orchard, delivery of more visitor parking bays, as well as increased pedestrian permeability throughout the site. The scheme has received no objections from technical statutory consultees, including Suffolk County Council Highways and the local Lead Flood Authority. Whilst comments from residents have focused on works to Turkey Hall Lane, as commented on earlier, access matters have already been dealt with as part of the outline planning application. We've noted in earlier discussions today the issues relating to sustainability and particularly the use of renewables. An application to discharge condition 19, which relates to the sustainability strategy, has been submitted, and whilst Flagship's priority is air source heat pumps, as part of the discharge of that condition, I think they would be willing to look at the potential for photovoltaics. In conclusion, the scheme before you is one which we believe represents a high-quality, sustainable solution to bring forward a committed development site which has undergone significant consultation with key stakeholders. I therefore respectfully request that officers approve this application in accordance with their officer's recommendation. Members approve this application in accordance with officer's recommendation, so that Flagship may start delivering this high-quality extension to the village of Bacton. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, members. Councillor Hadingham.
Thank you. You say you haven't got any holding objections, but you actually have got one from our strategic housing team about all the affordable housing being together. What do you say about that?
Apologies for that, you're absolutely right. I think it's been touched on by your officer. It's the point in relation to the pepper potting of affordable housing across the site. The first point I'd make is, as we've seen with the plans that have been shown on the screen, the scheme is tenure blind, so you cannot tell the difference between affordable and market accommodation. In addition to that, I think we have to have regard to the Section 106 agreement, which is attached to the Outline Planning Commission. That requires that no more than 50% of the market units can be provided until 50% of the affordable are provided, and then it goes up to no more than 80% of the market accommodation can be provided until all of the affordable is provided. That requirement as part of the legal agreement does influence the construction of the site and how it will be developed. That is partly a result of the scheme design and the location of the affordable units. In addition to that, as per the point that was made by the officer, there are management issues which have been raised by Flagship which have led to that layout.
Councillor Gill, please.
Thanks, Chair. And just before I ask my question, as previously advised to yourself to let the committee know I will need to leave just before 1 o'clock if we are still going there.
Thank you.
A simple question, really. Why no public consultation in the development of this scheme? Such consultation, as the parish representative says, is very common these days, and almost invariably leads to, if not invariably, leads to an improved scheme.
I think the decision was taken that the public consultation would consist of a presentation to the parish council and a meeting was open to the public prior to the application being submitted. There had been a substantial amount of consultation as part of the outline application, and then there was further engagement post-submission. I think. Peter, if you've got anything to mention.
Can we confirm that actually took place?
Chairman, I don't believe we had such a public consultation on the question of this application before us.
Okay, thank you. And again, we're at reserved matters, so I'm surprised this wasn't raised at the outline. Yeah. Yeah, the agent.
Yeah, I think one of the bases we did consult the parish council and the public at the reserve matters, at the outline application, and then when resubmitting for the reserve matters, we reconsulted the parish council themselves, which again, as Ian alluded to, concluded in as the removal of the orchard and making more usable open space for Bacton Parish Council.
Okay, thank you. Happy with that. Councillor Stringer, please.
Just to clarify, that second consultation was via Zoom, I seem to remember. It was a virtual consultation. It was as part of the parish council meeting, part of the public section of it. You alluded to, in the original outline, there were works outlined to Turkey Hall Lane, which would widen it to 5.5 metres. Can you clarify that can be done legally without taking people's private gardens?
Yes, there was a detailed scheme in relation to the off-site highway works that were required to deliver the scheme that was agreed as part of the outline scheme. As I said at the outset, as did the officer, access arrangements were approved as part of the scheme. They were agreed with Suffolk County Council, and they will go forward as part of a Section 278 agreement, will have to be in place. And obviously as part of that, you're absolutely right, Councillor, they will need to make sure that Flagship or the Highway Authority are in control of that land.
Yeah, and like I say, we've measured it on the ground and we believe that to be contrary to the case. So you have measured it on the ground, I take it? Because it's so important to this to be deliverable.
I haven't personally measured it on the ground, but as I say...
Okay, so we're getting this, I measured, you measured the document, so we won't go there. So we'll bring in Mr Pateman G, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Stringer.
Yeah. This is the first time I've looked at this outline application, I will admit, and I may require Ian to come in if necessary as I say this, and I probably need Alex to point out if I'm incorrect. This is a very unusual condition. On number 11 of the outline, it's a very interestingly worded condition as well. It basically says, prior to the first occupation of dwellings hereby permitted, so it was occupation, not commencement of the development, the works within the public highway shown on a specific drawing, which is listed here, shall be designed, constructed and completed in agreement with Suffolk County Council Highways. There is no provision within that for agreement by the District Council to be involved, which is highly unusual for a planning condition. However, essentially it's self-completing because that requires the highways works shown on a specific drawing at the outline to be constructed, designed and agreed and completed, very importantly, an agreement with the Suffolk County Highways Authority. If there is any alteration necessary to that drawing, then they will have to go through an application process to do that, to vary that condition. So if that is not, if that drawing is incapable of going forward, they would have to go through the rigmarole of planning yet again to get that resolved. And that is all the advice I can give you because it's a highly unusually written condition. But that issue essentially is not the reserve matters in front of you because of that.
Mr. Dupree.
Yes, I agree. If it is physically impossible, practically impossible to comply with the condition, then they must, in order to proceed with the development, there'd have to be a Section 73 application to vary the condition.
Thank you. Yes, one more question about pedestrian friendly. You mentioned this development's pedestrian friendly. I've been asking for clarification about where this meets the so-called footpath network, because where it's shown it contacts the footpath network is basically an area of broken paving in front of some 60s built housing. So that's why I want to see the picture, to see what the legality of that was. Thank you.
I have messaged, forgive me for doing this, but aware that you might need this, I have messaged my colleague and just asked them if they could quickly look at, and I appreciate this is Google Street View, and I apologise on behalf of officers not to have a specific photo, but this may help. I'm hoping this helps.
So that's not it. That's not it. No. You do. Yeah. It's in front of that black car there. Yeah.
Right. Can we possibly just go back to the map and then dive in again so we can just orientate where we are? Or is it just on the right-hand side? Yeah. Can you go forward and then turn right? Okay. Okay, so if you go to that junction, the corner, okay. So, yeah, go up there. I apologise for this. Right, to the right, that's the bit we're looking at. Just turn the angle of the camera to the right a bit. That's it. So where your cursor just was, where that bush was, I think is roughly where the connection point would be. If that's okay, Councillor, if you're okay to take it from there.
I think we get the picture. Next, Councillor Mellon, please.
So, Chair, it's a question for the developer. Is that okay? The question is about the, are you prepared to commit to a haul route coming in from the north to this site? The haul route for your construction traffic, are you prepared to commit to coming in from the north, i.e. down Clay Lane and Turkey Hall Lane?
I'll bring Mr Papenji in before we go there.
So condition 13 of the outline planning permission is for the construction management plan, and I'm just going over that very quickly. It should say here, yes it does, means of access, traffic routes, vehicular parking, manoeuvring areas shall be agreed. So that is in place as a condition to be agreed. I'm not aware that's been agreed yet though, has it, Alex? No. So that is still for agreement and it's been conditioned accordingly.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Okay, in that case, we're going to move to debate. So who'd like to start? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we've got the ward member of Councillor Mellon.
My apologies. Yeah, ward member, Councillor Mellon, who won't be voting on this as he's the ward member as well. Councillor Mellon, my apologies.
No, fine. Thank you, Chair. No, I don't have a great deal to say. Just to give a little bit of background, the outline application for this site came forward at a time when Mid-Suffolk didn't have a 5-year land supply. The site is outside the settlement boundary. We probably wouldn't put this site forward now, but we are where we are. It has outline permission. I accept that the construction will go ahead. And my concern is the poor design of this development. And there's a couple of things. I've already raised the issue of public surveillance of the main area of open space. I don't think that's adequate. It could have been designed better. There's also a large area of parking, a sort of parking court on the south of the site, and that's adjacent to residential gardens of existing dwellings off North Close. And I think that is poor design. It's putting parking right next to existing gardens, and there will be a loss of amenity to those people, and that could have been designed better as well. The landscaping on the north boundary of the development again is poor, and instead of there being a sort of screening and softening of that boundary, there will be hard landscaping in view from Turkey Hall Lane. But the main concern about this site is the access. Turkey Hall Lane is a very narrow lane, and it then joins onto Clay Lane, which is basically a single track going round and eventually joining up with the B113. The developer has to widen Turkey Hall Lane down to their site to make it a two-way road. It's only a single track with passing places at the moment. And that is absolutely necessary for this development to go ahead. Myself and Councillor Stringer have measured it on the ground. We do not believe that 5.5 metres is achievable with the existing highway, taking a metre either side, as highways can. It goes beyond that in places. So I look forward to that being proved wrong, that they're able to do it, but I don't think they can at the moment. So we're left with a situation where construction traffic, according to the developer, once they've done that work, will access the site off Turkey Hall Lane, i.e. coming through the centre of Bacton, i.e. coming through Hawley and Hawley Green. And with the other sites in Bacton, we know this is going to prove a real problem. It's going to be unacceptable to the community because we already have a pinch point, and the pinch point is the primary school. And if you try and get through Bacton at the beginning or end of the school day, it's almost impossible to get through with a car, let alone a lorry. Now, it could be that the developers will agree to a condition which limited the lorries, at those times, which would be great. But I think better would be if the whole route could be from the north, and they could control the flow up and down Turkey Hall and Clay Lane. There's already provision, I think, in what they've suggested for timings of deliveries and so forth to be scheduled. It should be possible to bring in traffic from the north, from the B113, turning right into Clay Lane, not left. That would be very dangerous. And I would like to see that condition put on as part of the things we discussed just a moment ago. But I would really prefer that we deferred this application to improve the design. That's what I'd like the committee to do. I realise that development will come forward here, but I think this is poor and we could do better. So that's really what I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for the ward member? Okay, in that case, we will move to debate. Who's going to start? Councillor Stringer.
Everyone's been reluctant, so I'll jump in for them. Need to mention I'm the county councillor for this area, and I just want to give a tiny lecture to this district council about not allowing county councillors to speak at outline applications. We really need to rethink this, and this particular item is a particular case in point. The conditions put on by the county council at the original stage are way too weak, and I'll go on and explain why. Bacton is quite a unique village in terms of its traffic generation. It has an awful lot of businesses, which is great, brilliant. It's an economic little engine. It also has a very low railway bridge on the London to Norwich railway line. And we get repeated bridge strikes, either on Pound Hill or junction of Clay Lane and B1113. If a lorry strikes a bridge, the London-Norwich line has to be closed until engineers have come out and ruled that the bridges are still safe. That normally takes a minimum of 2 to 3 hours at £34,000 an hour to the lorry driver that hit it. Which is why it's so imperative that getting HGVs into this site or any site in Bacton has to be done correctly. If a driver makes a wrong turn and tries to get under the large bridge, bang, it's shut then for a minimum of 2 hours. The disruption widely is dreadful. Also, the cost to the hauler and developer is going to be significant. Equally, if you're coming in along the designated lorry route, which is the B1113, and you try and turn left into Clay Lane, that is such a tight turn left, you will also strike the bridge, which happens quite regularly. Again, railway line has to be closed, for an engineer to rule that there's nothing going to fall on the railway line. Turkey Hall Lane and Clay Lane is a lorry route for anything trying to avoid the low bridge. So what we've done here, we've approved a development on a very narrow lane with no footpath provision in it that is a lorry route. You understand why the reserve matters here are so utterly critical. And I have to say, I hollowly laugh when the county council then says, by the way, can we have a footpath link leading you north? There's no footpath to go to. You're going to be dicing with an unmodified road with lorries that can't go in two ways, but they're expected to. So this is quite tight, and that routing needs to be absolutely pivotal and central to the building out of this. Okay, that's the highways bit over with. Equally coupled with the fact, obviously, Councillor said there's probably nearly 400 homes going to be built in the next few years in Bacton. And this is the first one of them, I believe, at reserve matter stage. So it's important we get the routing correct. Getting on to this plan, I have to say, when I saw the second iteration of this plan, I was probably mortified in terms of, we had a design originally at outline stage which could have probably rubbed along with. This one I have significant issues with. I'm very surprised the police haven't responded to the unsurveyed area of playing area where there is, just the other side of the hedge, there has been regular police activity because of the other side of the hedge is in the current playing field, where we do have issues with that being so far away from where people can see. So having a new designed play area here, where basically you've got nobody overlooking it at all, is reckless, I feel, and also is not recommended in designing out crime and the secure by design. It goes against that. Whereas the front entrance has been recognised that we have got people that cross overlook it, so that can be secured. I think my greatest regret about this is how this completely ruins the residential amenity of the people in that last little row. The person that lived in that end house, which has been extended, so actually it is a lot closer to this new development as proposed in this plan, has had 30, 40 years of uninterrupted views of countryside. They basically had a field to the right of them. Okay, that's changed. So what they would have had affecting their residential amenity is a couple of tractors a year and probably a combine harvester. They've now got a built form, which I believe is a block of flats right near them. And also, to add to that, in your back garden, you've now got a car park. Brilliant. I think that's appalling design in the 21st century, particularly in what is a rural location. This is a rural location. So for me, this current design, I wouldn't defer it, I would blatantly refuse it because I think it is that poor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Anybody else? We all must have some thoughts on this, so let's voice them. Yeah.
Could I just very briefly explore the surveillance point made? Alex, is it possible to get the plan back on screen for me? Just so I can understand the point being made, if I can.
Sorry, yeah, John. Yes, the area of amenity land at the front, of open space at the front,
yep,
that is overlooked by that row of houses, and the houses can look across the road, and it's surveyed from almost an arc.
Yeah, so the front of those houses overlook that area,
and the front, particularly of the existing houses, is very close. So the surveillance from there is quite heavy duty.
So we go to the other area, which is the squarer open space to the right-hand side.
There's nothing there.
We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 houses on that boundary whose rear garden, are they bungalows or are they two-storey at that point? Alex, if you can tell me. They're two-storey. So we've got first floor bedroom windows overlooking.
No.
And then we've got another property to the left, which is also got its rear garden.
I think I'll stop that debate point. Actually, I think it's tenuous. I think
it is tenuous. I just wanted to make sure we're clear of what
positions houses are and if they were bungalows or not. It's almost been deliberately designed so nobody's overlooking it from a living area.
But that's strictly not true, because we've just seen the map and we can see, actually, as Mr Pateman has pointed out, there's at least 4 houses looking at. So I do get your point.
Chair, from a bedroom.
Yeah. So what?
From a bedroom. Yeah, the overlooking insecure by design is from living areas, Chair.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
If I may, if I may just come in. Ultimately, I wasn't just looking to have an argument over the actual what he's overlooking or not. I just wanted to assess the nature of the overlooking, and I just wanted to clarify that that's what we're talking about here. Thank you.
In the secure by design, it says the overlooking should be from living areas, like kitchens and living rooms, that kind of area that are populated for the majority of the time, Chair. Thank you.
Get your point. Thank you. Anybody else wish to enter debate? From my point of view then, if nobody... Councillor Warboys, do you want to come in?
Yes, I was just trying to sort of put some ideas together. I sort of note the parish council's concern about the loss of open space, and I've sort of thought about this. You know, you're losing from the initial proposition. You had an open space the size of a cricket field, and I take on board the parish council's concern that they may lose, which I think is a sad idea. The was it Queen Mary playing field adjacent to the railway line, and that's going to be replaced by something which is half the size of a cricket field. I did think that perhaps the setting of the heritage asset might be improved by the more open space along the side of the road, but the access is really worrying. I have driven down that road. It is very narrow. I wouldn't like to really meet a lorry coming the other way. There's very little scope for manoeuvre. But I think one of my concerns most is about the grouping together of the affordable housing. I realise that this is on the advice of the agent that's going to manage these properties, but from a social point of view, it isn't recommended. So I don't think there are really enough positives about the new proposal of design really to help me make a decision in favour of it. It hasn't moved forward, I don't think. I think if anything, especially from the parish council's point of view, it's a retrogressive move.
Thank you. Anybody else? Can you put the map up, please, that shows the previous proposal and the current proposal? And while we're doing that, Mr Pettigrew.
I should obviously point out that ultimately the outline plan we're referring to was indicative, and you know we would expect something maybe similar, but there are also alternative ideas that could have come forward at reserved matter stage. Your judgment here is whether the alternative proposal in front of you is suitable in terms of layout, design, appearance, and so forth in terms of the reserved matters before you. I will say this though, just to add, the proposal outline secured open space to be provided. It did not secure the level of open space to be provided. That was not dealt with at that time, and therefore we've got nothing specific to say there shall be a minimum of X for the open space area. Just to bear that in mind should we get into the conversation about minimal spaces.
Thank you, that's useful. So put both maps up there just so we can refresh ourselves on what was before us before and what is now. And in terms of the open space, in my opinion, it's only my opinion, actually it looks a little bit more open. That's the first thing, straight away, just looking at that. Yeah, there's a great big area to the northeast, but look, we've still got an area to the northeast, we've got one to the west, and we've got one to the north. And actually, Councillor Warboys, what you said was right. It gives more protection, really, to that listed building outlook as well, so it's a good thing. When it comes down to the buildings in the south, in my opinion, it's less of an issue on amenity for the houses that are currently there, because there's less of them. Now, when it comes to the car parking, the open spaces for cars, I don't honestly see how that affects amenity. And I looked at amenity, It talks about privacy. It talks about overbearing effects. It talks about natural light and outlook, environmental effects and other design guidance. I don't see, actually, there's a major issue or an amenity loss to the houses that currently reside on the south of this estate. But that's just my opinion, based on what I've just read. And it's up to you to decide whether it is or whether it isn't, I guess. All of us, in fact. The surveillance side of it, for the protection of the playing areas, it's arguable, and I think your point's well made, actually. But I don't think it's a stopper, to be honest with you. The road layout, or the housing layout, in my opinion, is better than what was before us before. But my major concern is the transportation, HGVs, etc., coming down Turkey Lane, and obviously the aspects Councillor Stringer brought out about the bridge in Bacton. To me, that is still a bit of an issue. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's enough conditioning there to assure it. And I need to be assured that that work's going to be good and that work is feasible before I could go with this. So, Mr. Paintmcgee, come back on that one.
I can't give you that assurance because the way the condition is worded puts it in the hands of Suffolk County Council Highways. So only they can give you the assurance as the Highways Authority, and I would expect them to be mindful in their considerations of highway safety as they should be. That is their job.
Which is pretty much the conclusion most of us probably came to. There is a condition there. So we either trust in that highways, we either trust in Suffolk County Council to abide, and the agents, to abide in that condition or not, because that's what we're talking about. If that's the one stopgap, we're talking about its trust element and the legal side of it. So it's up to us to decide. Councillor Hadingham.
Thanks. I don't think I'm really going to help much because I prefer the old design. I don't like the affordable housing all being grouped together. I don't like that cluster. I think that's too many houses in one corner. I think they look crowded there. And so I do prefer the original design, but whether we can turn this down on poor design and hang all, everything on that is another thing. I don't like the idea of the HGVs going down that road or hitting that bridge, but if this is already got through an outline, I don't know if, like you say, apart from what conditions are already there, whether we can do anything about that. But unless someone is prepared to propose that we turn it down because of poor design, which I'm not prepared to do that, I think we're sort of at an impasse, really.
Councillor Hanning, thank you. And obviously, just going back to the description of development, and part of the reserve matters, part of it is layout. So it has got a point. So you need to think about, if you're going to go refuse, you need to think about what you're going to refuse it on. As far as the social housing goes, and the pepper potting idea of having them all over the place, as it's stated, these houses look no different than normal houses. So what are we saying? That we just don't like all people in social housing living in the same area? I mean, what's that about? The dynamics and the economics about it makes sense to me. And if the houses look the same, they're normal people, what's the problem? I don't get it, but that's my opinion. Based on northern housing estates that I used to live in, that is my opinion. So at the end of the day, I don't think that's a factor. And I think it's wrong of us to actually say that it shouldn't be the way it is, personally. But that's just my opinion. So, a stern debate. Anybody else? Councillor Caston.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that the second design is the better design. I know there's a lot of disagreement in this chamber, but the affordable housing, yeah, I don't agree in separating affordable housing from the rest of it. I think it's got nothing to do with anything apart from you have an area that's affordable. It's all affordable, and I think it should be mixed up amongst the other houses, so everything's exactly the same. There's no different groupings. But I think with this new design, everybody gets a bit of that open space, and it's in that environment. You've got the driving in as well through the open space. I think that's quite important as well, rather than having it tucked in at the back. and it's quite a large amount of open space in one place. So I can understand what councillors are saying about having a reasonably tall building backing onto another dwelling, an existing dwelling, but I think that's better than the original because of the orientation of it. And I think we've got to hope that Suffolk County Council are completely on top of other issues in here, but from this meeting, from what we're doing here, I think that I would go for approval of this application.
Do I take that as a proposal?
Yes, happy to propose.
Okay, so we have a proposer for approval. Do we have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Stringer.
I'd like to put a counter proposal, Chair. I put a counter proposal, and this is me stepping down somewhat, that we defer this for reconsideration, because I believe it is contrary to policy GP1 in the joint local plan. It clearly says the interrelationship between buildings and open spaces in any layout should act to minimise opportunities for criminal behaviour, consistent with good layout and architectural design. I don't believe this does that. It also suggests that the design should enhance for all concerned. I cannot believe that that person living in that house at the end of North Close, they're going to be enhanced. The issue about the car park, it's not so much about the car itself, it's the nature of the people entering and exiting the car at whatever time of day or night. The banging of car doors. Cars nowadays have all sorts of bleepers on them that open up the back. That is going to ruin their residential amenity, frankly, and that could have easily been designed out even after a bit of consultation, Chair. Thank you. So I would move that we defer this application with the agents, everyone hearing our concerns, for them to try and redesign this. Thank you.
Thank you. So we didn't have a seconder. We do have a second proposal. Before I go any further, we need a seconder to that proposal, please. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would second Councillor Stringer's proposal. I don't ever believe that a decision should be deferred simply because it's difficult. I think there are enough issues here that if they're subject to the officer's advice, that if we have scope to allow further consideration of the design. I don't know, I was thinking, what a shame that we can't condition the County Council's conditioning. I think I'm right in saying that's not legally permissible. But if a deferral allows time to establish the County Council's approach on the matter, then I think that would be beneficial. But I think in these circumstances, deferral does seem a wise course of action.
Councillor Warboys.
Yes, I think I'll support deferral as well. But is it possible to defer also to get some design proposal from Suffolk County Council as to how the roadway?
No.
We can't have that. Ask for that.
No, but I'll get your support. Mr. Potenchi.
Essentially, we already have that. We have a drawing that's been secured by the outline, although I admit we haven't got that to present. So obviously, if we did come back, we'd have that drawing to hand if that was... Did we not? Yeah, we should have that on the outline application. But I can't help you with that particular request. I missed 2 seconds. Was there a seconder, or we haven't got a seconder yet?
Yeah, second is Councillor Gould.
Thank you.
So, anybody else wish to enter the debate? We do have a proposal and a seconder. I'd just like to summarise it. It's nice that you put some weight to the argument on the security, and actually now we've got something tangible that we can write into the proposal. So thank you for that work. Therefore, we do have a proposer and a seconder. I'll ask the governance officer, please, to read the proposal and go for the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just clarify with Mr Pateman-G what specifically, because I haven't got down what parts of the actual deferral is on, so if I could just clarify.
I thought we were still having that debate, if I'm honest with you. So far from Councillor Stringer, I have got that the proposal represents for design and layout, picking up specifically on the parking of cars adjacent to residents of North Close in the rear car park. I was unclear though, and then obviously there's associated harm to amenity with that, if the surveillance of open space areas and placement of affordable housing were part of that concern.
Certainly from me, the surveillance of is the affordable housing less so. You can already identify affordable housing on an estate, and the ones without the garage. It's quite simple. So I'm less worried about that. I'm more worried about future crime and criminal activity and whatever going on by policy when we have clear ones that are supposed to prevent this.
Thank you. Seconder, you content with that? Thank you. So it's not the affordable housing?
Fine, that's fine. So we've got those two elements. I was going to suggest that H16 might come into it as well as GP1, but I will leave that there. Thank you.
Bear with me 2 seconds, Chair. I'll just write part of that up. So. Sorry, thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, the vote that will be before members is that application DC 21 00641 be deferred for the reasons as read out by the area planning manager just now. Is everyone clear what they are? Okay. Oh, Mr.
Did you want me to read them out one more time?
I think that would be prudent.
Okay, so I've got down here the proposed development, the development currently represents poor design and layout, including lack of suitable surveillance of open space areas, parking of cars immediately adjacent to residential gardens, and therefore fails the provisions of GP1. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will now open the vote, so if members could please go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner of today's agenda and go on the subsection of attendance/voting, and then please click on the blue line which shows the vote in progress. Councillor Carston, can I please take your vote verbally?
Thank you. I'll vote for deferral.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. All votes have now been received, with Councillor Mellon not voting as the board member, as per the planning charter, and that means that the vote is carried unanimously by 7 votes.
Thank you. That is carried. As we said before, as previously noted, the applications that were due for this afternoon, which were 01747 and 01800, have been withdrawn by the applicants and will not be heard this afternoon. Site inspections.
None declared, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, thank you for all your efforts and contributions, and good to see you all. Stay safe, and I end the meeting.